It all started with the fact that the main character, when he came to his senses, found himself in a novel about an unusual world, the Taoist and the beast, in the body of a tiger. Sometime later, two men found a dog that had been killed by someone. One man noticed that someone had killed the dog without a single bark, and had walked away from there without leaving a trace, without even being caught in a trap. And then the same man noticed that this was clearly not an ordinary animal. Suddenly, two other men ran up to those two men and said that the noose and the trap were also in place. The men said that the traps were definitely set correctly, which meant the animal must have been injured, but there was not a single trace. Turning to their boss, the very first man said that this was the first time he had encountered such a thing, and that they had better leave here quickly. Then their boss shouted for everyone to shut up, because they were preventing him from thinking. The man began to think that if his instincts were not deceiving him, then they were trapped, and if they moved now, this beast could attack them, but they could not remain inactive either. After thinking for a moment, the man said that they would leave from here, and commanded that the others leave the traps, which they would pick up tomorrow, and also that they should stick together until they reached the valley. The boss wanted to add that the guys shouldn't act rashly, but before he could finish speaking, a man suddenly fell to the ground. Someone's huge red paw pinned the man to the ground, and the claws left deep wounds on his chest. As it turned out, it was a huge tiger, which, a little later, threw the man to the side with great force. The men did not expect this beast to appear at all. Their leader could not load his crossbow because his hands were shaking so much from fear. Suddenly, with its mouth wide open, the tiger rushed straight at the man, and then the beast began to wave its paws with sharp claws. The man with the severed arm, but still alive, said that they had disturbed someone who shouldn't have been touched. But the tiger was not going to leave anyone alive and attack the last survivor. The next day, in some village, someone asked about what they say, that today is that day. A man and a woman were sitting at the table and eating dinner. One of them asked again. The other answered that today was the day of the offering for the owner of the mountain. The man, taking a bite of food, replied that it was so, and it would be tonight. The woman asked who it would be this time, to which the man asked if she knew the local nobleman, and then said that it would be one of his slaves. And then he added that this slave was still small, but her hair was white and her eyes were blue, just like a ghost. Night fell. The nobleman stood on the street, waiting for something, when suddenly someone called out to him. As it turned out, it was an old woman, and next to her stood a little girl covered with clothes. The gentleman answered the old woman that she was a good girl for bringing the girl, and now she could go, and then added, already turning to the girl, that she should follow him. The girl, clutching the clothes that covered her in her hands, did not move from the spot. Then the man shouted at her and said that he told her to follow him, and only then did the girl come to her senses. The nobleman led the girl to the palanquin, where several men were already standing, greeting the nobleman. When the girl sat down in the palanquin, the men lifted it up and carried it somewhere, and the nobleman stood and watched, seeing them off. Meanwhile, the girl's hands were shaking very badly. The men carried this palanquin somewhere further and further into the mountains. Having left him for some time, I realized that they immediately, as if afraid of something, ran back. For a while nothing happened. The palanquin just stood on the ground. Then the girl decided to get out of it. When she got out of it, the girl immediately ran in some direction. When she reached the cave, the girl stopped and exclaimed about how big the cave was. But then, remembering something, she immediately fell silent and covered her mouth with her hand. The girl thought to herself that she would soon meet the master of the mountain, which meant she had to behave with dignity so that he wouldn't get angry. She thought that she was the one who would become the bride of the master of the mountain. Making her way deeper into the cave, the girl shook with fear and thought about how dark it was here. Suddenly someone asked her who she was, and the girl froze with tears in her eyes. Trying to go further, the girl's legs gave way and she fell to the ground, and her cloak flew off. Suddenly someone asked the girl even louder who she was, while the girl was shaking with fear. The girl stuttered and wanted to answer, but she couldn't say it properly. But after a little while, and gathering her courage, she clearly answered that she was the one who would henceforth honor him as her husband, and said that her name was Chelsea. This time the tiger did not answer. The girl blushed a little and covered her mouth with her hand, thinking that she had probably said too much. Suddenly, a huge tiger emerged from the depths of the cave. The girl stood up abruptly and screamed that she had been told that the first time always hurts, but they told her to endure it if she wanted to become a bride. And then, putting her hand on her chest, she said that she belonged entirely to him, her husband. Then the tiger screamed for Chelsea to get out of there, and the girl's hair and dress began to flutter from the scream. The tiger said that he wasn't interested in all the nonsense the girl had just said, causing the girl to freeze with a blank expression on her face. And suddenly she burst into tears. The beast asked loudly why she had suddenly started crying, but the girl was too busy sobbing to answer. The tiger tried again to tell the girl to get out, but she immediately burst into tears even more than before. This made the beast fall to the ground, covering his head with his paw and thinking about how much he hated crying. Then, more calmly, the tiger again tried to ask what had happened and why she was crying, but the girl continued to sob loudly and did not answer. Suddenly, having calmed down a little, she answered intermittently that she was his fiancé, and he was throwing her out. Wiping away the girl's tears with his claw, the tiger sighed and replied that since it was dark outside, he would allow her to spend the night here. Then the girl burst into tears again and began screaming, which shocked the beast. Snuggling up to the tiger's paw, Chelsea looked up at the beast with a smile on her face, leaving snot on its fur. The next morning the girl lay on the tiger's fur and snored quietly. The beast, meanwhile, was no longer sleeping, and was thinking about how long this girl had been sleeping. And then, remembering the appearance of this girl, white hair, blue eyes, he noted that there are very few people in the world with such an appearance, and noticed that she had leukemia. The tiger thought that the girl was cursed by unknown creatures, and she also had the power of one of them, and now this little child would become a terrible creature, over whom everyone would tremble with fear. And then he thought about the fact that the blood of these white-blooded people is an elixir that has no equal, and he added that now everyone would come for her, and that she was more dangerous than he thought, which meant that she couldn't be left. Suddenly the girl woke up. Still half asleep, she stroked the tiger and asked him if he was awake. Suddenly blushing a little and becoming more animated, Chelsea said that they had spent the night together, which meant that she was now officially his fiancée. Suddenly the tiger stood up abruptly, causing the girl to fall to the ground, and told her that since the sun had already risen, she should go back to her home. The girl replied that she could not, because she had been told that if she did not become his bride, she would be punished. The tiger, surprised, asked the girl who would punish her, and who dared to do it, to which the girl replied that it was the nobleman and his son. The beast, hearing this, thought that those bandits were sent by the same people, and it turns out that this little girl is their sacrifice for him. Chelsea begged the tiger not to leave her, and said that she was very good at washing and eating absolutely everything, and that she was generally good at everything, and therefore he should not leave her. The beast thought that if he sent the girl back to the village, she would be immediately thrown out and die. Not wanting to come to this conclusion, the tiger thought about what he should do. Having come up with an idea, he thought about sending her to another village, and if he also gave her some useful herbs, then perhaps she would survive. Tiger led Chelsea to the exit of the cave, holding some things in his teeth. Opening his mouth, he threw some roots and a piece of cloth onto the ground. After looking at these things, the girl immediately asked what they were. The beast replied that he gives her ginseng, and she takes it and goes, without returning to her own, to another village. The girl tries to object, saying that she is his fiancée. Frightened, the tiger tells the girl to stop talking like that, because how can he be her husband, and then adds that she should not say anything unnecessary and do as he tells her. And then he collects ginseng and a blanket with his tail, and says that if she sells this root, she will be able to buy a small house and even have some left over. The tiger then gives these things into Chelsea's hands, to which she says that she doesn't need anything, and that only him is enough. But then the beast turns around threateningly and tells the girl to stop making him angry. And then he goes into the cave, thinking that he is the one who is the master of the mountain, and therefore is doomed to be alone forever. But then the girl calls out to the beast, to which he tells her to get out of here already. But Chelsea says she can't go down and doesn't know where the other village is. The beast sighs, thinking that he can help, because he is basically not busy. And then he presses his head to the ground and tells the girl to sit on him. Chelsea resolutely ties the blanket containing the ginseng around her chest, and then she starts to climb up the tiger's face, which makes him a little puzzled, and asks if she can do it easier, but he himself thinks that she could have climbed up from the side. Having climbed onto the tiger's head, the girl turns her head and suddenly her eyes widen. As it turned out, she saw incredibly beautiful mountains and forests from above. Patting the tiger on the head, Chelsea says that she is probably the first person to sit on the neck of a ferocious tiger like this, which makes him angry. And then she joyfully closes her eyes, points her finger forward, and shouts for the beast to run as fast as possible, calling him her husband. And then the tiger pushed off and jumped forward, telling the girl to stop calling him husband. Having gone down a little lower, the tiger said that there was already a village over there. Chelsea, meanwhile, was pulling the tiger's ears, and he asked her to stop doing it because it hurt him. The girl immediately let go of his ears and apologized. And then she suddenly hugged the beast by the neck. In response, the tiger told her not to stick to him and to come down faster. In response, the girl immediately agreed, let go of the tiger and slid down his paw. As he walked back into the cave, the tiger said out loud that although he was a little interested, she had already become boring to him, and therefore they should never see each other again. Then Chelsea quickly grabbed the beast's tail and asked him where he was going. In response, the tiger asked if the girl didn't know what a sin it was to hold animals by their tails. The girl replied that she knew about it, but he was leaving his bride, to which the beast replied that she was not his bride at all. Continuing to pull the tiger's tail, Chelsea reminded him that they had spent the night together, and therefore she was his fiancée. In response, the tiger said that the girl was completely crazy, and asked how a tiger and a human could get married, and whether she understood what it meant to spend the night, because she was babbling all sorts of things. The girl screamed that despite everything she had married him, so he should be responsible for her. Wondering where the little girl got such strength from, the tiger said that he even got her ginseng, which she could sell and live without denying herself anything. Chelsea abruptly threw the bag of ginseng onto the ground and shouted that she didn't want it that way, and that if the tiger wasn't around, she didn't need this useless herb. The beast asked himself whether the girl could imagine how expensive this useless grass was, and then he thought that it would not end like this, which meant that even though he did not want to do it, he would have to. Worried that his tail would fall off, the tiger suggested that the girl go to the village to sell this ginseng, and then return back, thereby paying for the dowry. The girl's mind seized upon the word dowry, and her eyes sparkled, and she herself blushed. Joyfully picking up a ginseng wrapped in cloth from the ground, she told the beast not to go anywhere, because she would return quickly. The tiger agreed with this and began to warn the girl. He told her not to hurry too much, but the girl ran along the road as fast as she could. He then added that she should be careful, and Chelsea immediately fell to the ground. But a second later she stood up and walked on, disappearing into the distance. Near one of the houses in the village, near a fire on which stood a kettle, an old man sat and fanned the fire with the help of a fan. Chelsea walked up to him and said that she had come to sell him something. When the old man looked at the girl, he immediately caught the gaze of blue eyes, and then the old man jumped away from the girl with a scream. But as he moved away, his scream became quieter. The man said to himself that he thought it was a ghost, and then, clearing his throat, asked what the girl had brought him. The girl took ginseng out of the cloth and gave it to the old man, who began to look at it closely. Realizing that it was ginseng, the old man loudly asked Chelsea where she found it, to which the girl replied that her husband gave it to her, and the man asked again, and the girl replied that she had to sell it to pay for her dowry. Suddenly something awakened in the old man, and he thought that these roots looked to be about 300 years old, and this child clearly did not know their value and looked very stupid, which meant that he could easily deceive her and get this root for a couple of coins. But suddenly he came to his senses and sighed, thinking how base it was that he had thought of deceiving a child. And then the old man said that he could not buy such an expensive product, and advised her to go to the house of a local rich man, and said that she should definitely say that he conveyed that this was real ginseng. In response, Chelsea bowed low to the old man, thanking him. Meanwhile, eating meat in his cave, the tiger was thinking out loud that nothing could compare to the emotion of tearing meat from a bone alone. The beast said that the world is always like this, namely that the fault lies with the one who was deceived, because one cannot be stupid, because this is already unforgivable for this world, and in general, if you think about it, then he is the one who suffered, because he was living well. And then some child came and almost took away his peaceful life. But then he thought, what would happen if the girl suddenly came here with a dowry, maybe moved in? But a second later he dismissed this thought and said that he was the master of the mountain, and therefore how could he just move because of some girl? Suddenly a female voice asked him if he was worried, to which the beast asked again that he was worried about some girl. But then the voice replied that nothing had been said about the girl. Then, feeling a little awkward, the tiger replied that he was worried about his ginseng. In response, the voice said that it was understandable that he was worried about him, because these disgusting people would definitely resort to dirty means to get ginseng. The voice continued and said that perhaps this girl would be beaten and he would be taken away. Or perhaps so that she would not spread rumors, I would kill her altogether." These words made the tiger a little nervous. Meanwhile, in the village, a nobleman was sitting and eating meat and rice while someone was actively calling him. The man slammed the table and shouted that he had warned them not to disturb him while he was eating, and then added that they had made him lose his appetite, and then asked what had happened there. The servant replied that the doctor uncle had sent someone to sell ginseng. The nobleman went out to look at this ginseng, and when he saw it, he thought that it was the first time he had seen a root of such size, and wondered how such a valuable thing had ended up in the hands of a child. But then he noticed that the girl had white hair and blue eyes, and suspicions crept into his head. Then, grabbing his chin, the man asked if she was a slave of one house, naming the name of the master who had served the girl in the previous village. Chelsea asked how the man knew. Then, pointing his finger at the girl, the man shouted and asked why the offering to the master of the mountain was still alive, and stated that she had definitely run away. And then he said that she had definitely stolen this ginseng, to which the girl replied that her husband had given her this ginseng so that she could sell it. But the man did not believe her, and, without stopping shouting, said that the girl was not yet old enough to get married, which meant she was definitely lying, and declared that she was a thief and a runaway, and ordered the servants to take the ginseng from her and drive her away. The servants obeyed their master, and one of them extended his hand to the girl, telling her to give him her ginseng. While the man, holding the girl's hand, tried to take the root, Chelsea screamed that he couldn't take it away because her husband gave it to her. The servant noted that despite all his efforts, the girl did not move, and wondered how this little girl could be so strong. Losing his temper, the man pushed the girl hard, and she fell to the ground. Noticing this, the nobleman said that he wanted to let the girl go if she gave him the ginseng in a friendly manner, but now it would not work, and he ordered that straw be brought. Still clutching the root in her arms, Chelsea, bursting into tears, tried to justify herself, while a servant approached her with a stick in his hand. The man raised the stick over his head with a sharp movement of his hand, intending to hit the girl, and said that now they would see how her pain receptors worked. It was already evening, and Chelsea walked barefoot on the ground, crying and saying how much it hurt, and what she should do, since her ginseng had been taken away from her. But when she returned to the place where she had parted with the tiger, she found no one there. The girl froze and called her husband, and then she started running around the area, calling out to her husband and saying that Chelsea had already returned. Suddenly she stopped in front of the forest from where voices were heard, saying how delicious it smelled like girls. Some black monsters were crawling out from behind the trees, saying how sad it was that the girl was alone and how poor she was. They got closer and closer to her and asked her about how she was probably sad and in pain, and then told her to come to them, because they would be with her and would never abandon her. Chelsea gave in to the persuasion and slowly approached the monsters. Suddenly one of them opened his mouth and shouted that he was going to rip the flesh off the girl, but suddenly something cut against this monster. As it turned out, it was a tiger who said that how dare an empty soul like this covet what belongs to him. Standing behind Chelsea, the beast raised its head and opened its mouth, in which some kind of blue energy was gathering. The girl turned to look at the tiger, and then he asked who dared to do this to her. But the girl didn't answer, she just grabbed the animal's fur, and a little later she burst into tears again, screaming loudly. Meanwhile, in the village, a nobleman threw a bag of coins on the floor in front of his servant, and said that he had done a good job, and wanted to ask something. But the servant, as if guessing the master's thoughts, said, taking the bag in his hands, that the master should not worry, because he had already put the boys on guard, which meant that if something suddenly came, he would not be able to come in. After praising the servant again, the man sent him away and stared at the ginseng, thinking how beautiful and fine it was. Leaving the nobleman's chambers, the man thought that with this money he could rest for several months, and then he thought, why not go to a restaurant to see the girls? Suddenly he saw that the gates began to crack, and some light was visible from these cracks. Suddenly the gate finally broke down and light filled the entire courtyard. At that very moment, other servants gathered in the courtyard, asking who dared to break into their master's house. Suddenly they noticed with surprise that it was their recent guest. The servant who had beaten the girl earlier asked how she dared to come back here, and then said that it was clear that she had not received enough blows then, and now she wanted to die. Suddenly a tiger came out from behind her and said that they would still see who would die today. The nobleman, hearing noise in the courtyard, came out of his chambers and shouted to ask who was making noise at night under his house. But suddenly a man flew towards him and broke the doors. The tiger, entering further and further into the yard, asked, calling them bastards, whether they dared to touch the girl. He asked if they had gathered together and beaten up a little girl, and that was all they could do, while all the men were shaking with fear. Declaring that these people were worse than trash, the tiger opened its mouth and began to collect glowing energy there. Having said that he would nobly return to them everything that they had done to the girl, the beast raised his paw, releasing his claws. But then Chelsea shouted at him to wait and held out her little hand to him. Suddenly the girl stood in front of one of the men, protecting him, causing the tiger's paw to stop halfway. Chelsea said she didn't want the tiger to kill anyone and offered to take the ginseng and go home. Hearing this, the beast stopped and scratched its head, looking away. Afterwards he called one of the servants, which made him very scared. And then the beast with a threatening face ordered him to bring ginseng. But then a nobleman appeared with ginseng on a tray. Quickly bowing before the tiger, the man said that he protected the root and served behind it so that nothing would happen, waiting for the master of the mountain to come. In response to this, the beast roared at the man not to lie to him. Continuing to bow, the nobleman closed his eyes and prayed that the tiger would not kill him. Suddenly the beast said that if it were up to him, he would eat that dirty face off him, but he wouldn't do it, and he had the girl to thank for that. These words surprised the man so much that he opened his eyes wide. And then the tiger said that the man should give him all his wealth in return, and if he kept even one grain of rice for himself, it would end badly for him. Shaking with fear, the nobleman ordered that all his riches be delivered to the mountain as quickly as possible. Hearing this, the tiger and Chelsea disappeared, leaving behind a blue haze. After this, the man turned grey with fear, thinking that the husband the girl had spoken of turned out to be Spencer, the owner of the mountain, and that meant she was the bride of the mountain's keeper. Waking up the next day in his cave, Spencer wondered how it all happened. He looked at the riches that had been brought to his cave and mentally mourned his quiet, cozy nest, his quiet, routine life. Chelsea, meanwhile, said she found wild raspberries, and then she tried to put the berries in the tiger's mouth while he was still in a state of shock. Having put the berries in, the girl asked with a smile on her face if it was true that these berries were tasty. Thinking that he had brought her back, but nothing had changed, the beast finally stood up. In response, Chelsea asked where he was going. Heading towards the exit of the cave, Spencer replied that he was going to get a drink of water, to which the girl replied that she wanted one too, and ran after him. The tiger and the girl walked together through the forest to a pond. Here Chelsea, tugging at the tiger's fur, says that she is tired and asks how much longer they have to go, to which the beast replies that they have come, and before their eyes a pond opens up, over which fireflies are flying. Suddenly a catfish flies out of the pond, and he says, turning to the owner of the mountain, that they haven't seen each other for a long time. In response, Spencer says that it is true, and asks how he is doing, to which the catfish replies that as soon as the tiger came, his life got better, and Chelsea meanwhile quietly laughs, thinking about what this fish is saying. Why is it so funny to her? Spencer tells the catfish to give him what he left with him, to which the fish mockingly asks if he wants to give it to his bride, to which the tiger only annoyedly replies that he should stop talking. Here the catfish takes a small oblong box out of its mouth, and then he solemnly presents it. The beast tells the girl to try to open this box. Chelsea gets to open a box, from which light immediately bursts out. Taking out what was in the box, the girl exclaims, talking about how beautiful this hairpin is. Spencer explains that the pin was carved from a peach tree that is over 1,000 years old, and that the pin has the ability to ward off evil spirits, which is why the girl must keep it with her at all times. Slightly taken aback, Chelsea asks if he really wants to give the pin to her, to which the tiger sarcastically asks if he should wear it himself. Suddenly tears appear in the girl's eyes. In a panic, the beast asks what happened to her again. Chelsea says this is the first gift she has ever received out of the blue. Thinking that this is her first gift, the girl presses it to her chest and mentally swears to take care of it. The next morning, the girl is sleeping on the tiger's fur again, still holding her new hair clip. Spencer turns to see the girl mumbling in her sleep, and then he suddenly gets up, wondering when Chelsea managed to lie down next to him, and the girl gasps and falls to the ground. Still half awake, Chelsea asks her husband if he's awake yet while drooling. The tiger tells the girl to get ready because they are going on a long journey. In response, the girl asks where they are going, to which the beast replies that even if he tells her, she still does not know, and then tells her to take as many valuables as she can. Chelsea walks over to the chest of floor and jewels and begins to pick them up, putting them into a bag. Suddenly, a female voice asks the tiger if he has to do this, to which he mentally replies that he will not get involved in her destiny. In response, the voice asks if he does not think that becoming a bride was her destiny, or is he simply still afraid of forming connections with other people? The beast replies that everything is not like that at all, and that a person must have a human destiny, and it is very different from him, an animal, and besides, it is enough for him that this voice bothers him. The voice notes that the tiger used to hate the word fate, but now he has begun to use this word often. In response to Spencer, he says that she has remained as grumpy as she was, despite the years that have passed. In response, the voice mockingly says that they say that the older you get, the wiser you become, but apparently this is all nonsense because with age you can also become dumber. To which the tiger, starting to get angry, asks her again what she just said. In response, the voice innocently says that she did not talk specifically about him, and asks why he was so angry. Then Chelsea speaks up and says that she has finished getting ready, and stands in front of the beast with a bag in her hands. Sometime later, a woman and a black tiger appear in the cave. Entering the cave, the tiger notices that there is no one there, and asks the woman if this is not where they need to go. The woman replies that this is indeed the case, this is where they need to go, to which the tiger asks why then Spencer is not here. The woman replies that perhaps it is because he is afraid of him, to which the black beast asks if she really thinks so. The woman says if it's not Tao, then why isn't Spencer in his own house? Hearing this, the tiger bursts into a malicious laugh and says that it is so, that he ran away because he was afraid of him. In response, the woman sighs and asks if he wants to come back. Lying down on a rock, the beast replies that he doesn't want to, and says that they should stay here, because sooner or later Spencer will return. And then he bursts into caustic laughter again, saying that he wants to look at that face when Spencer sees him. In response, the woman sighs again, and tells the tiger not to laugh like that. Meanwhile, an old man and a little boy with a bag on their backs are walking along the road. Suddenly, as they climb the slope, they noticed a tiger in front of them. The boy exclaims in fear, and the old man, standing in front of him and covering him with his hand, tells him to move away from here. Spencer and the man lock eyes. But then the old man notices that there is a little girl sitting on the tiger's head. The boy and the man look at this girl in surprise. Noticing these people, Chelsea greets them with a smile on her face and waves her small hand. Blushing, the boy also greets her in it and waves his hand hesitantly in response. As the tiger walks away, the boy tells his teacher that there is a girl sitting on the tiger's neck, to which the old man replies that they will watch them. Night has fallen. A deer is running through the forest and chewing grass. Suddenly, a tiger attacks this deer. He successfully grabs this deer by the side with his teeth, while the other deer, seeing this, runs away in fear. Holding the deer in his mouth, Spencer thinks about why he always has to share his kill, but then calms himself down by thinking that they will soon reach the village. After taking the deer, the beast says that this is dinner, in response to which Chelsea runs up to the tiger and is surprised at how quickly the beast caught this deer. And then she says that you think that among tigers, Spencer has the most excellent hunting skills. The slightly stunned tiger replies that it was very easy, and then, scratching his nose, he says that he can get anything if the girl just says so. Then he tears off the deer's leg and gives it to the girl, telling her to eat it. In response, Chelsea says that she does not eat raw meat. Spencer is surprised by this and asks if she doesn't even know how to make a fire, to which the girl replies that she doesn't know. Suddenly, the old man they had met earlier notices that the tiger and the girl are having some trouble and says that they can share their fire with them. Chelsea thanks the old man and says that they can share some meat with them in return, to which the man replies that they would be grateful. Spencer is there, off to the side, chewing on a deer's body. Tiger thinks that the girl only had to bring fire here and wonders what she has been doing for so long. Looking towards the people, the beast notices that Chelsea is talking to a boy and notices how wide his smile is. The deer leg is roasted over a small fire. Chelsea looks at this and drools run down her face. Spencer scratches his cheek and asks the girl, looking away, what they were discussing for so long. Wiping away her drool with her sleeve, Chelsea replies that the boy is the same age as her, which is why they decided to be friends, and says that the boy's name is Ben. Suddenly, the girl's stomach begins to rumble loudly, and the tiger remarks out loud that the girl seems to be very hungry. Chelsea, worried and with red cheeks, replies that if the animal is hungry too, she can share with him. Spencer asks what she's talking about, because she herself is very hungry, because he can hear the whale howling in her belly. In response, the girl, a little offended, replies that the tiger has a whale in its belly. Licking his paw, The tiger says that it seems that hunger has hit the girl hard in the head, and then wonders why she is so ashamed. In response, the girl jumps up and says that everything is wrong. Spencer replies that he is not deaf, and that it is just him and her, and then asks if he can really distinguish the sound from his stomach. The girl begins to frown and puff out of anger. Suddenly she grabs the deer's leg, and shouting that the tiger is a fool, Chelsea runs away with her leg in her hands, while the animal wonders what is happening to her. As the girl runs deeper into the forest, a woman's voice sighs and asks if the tiger can't understand the girl's feelings. And then the voice asks if Spencer should follow her, because that's what's dangerous there. Wondering what he did wrong, the tiger says that the hairpin will protect her. The voice says that maybe the hairpin will protect her from evil spirits, but there are more terrible creatures in the forest, and maybe she will even get lost. In response, licking her paw, Spencer replies that then this is her destiny. Then the voice asks if fate did the same to her, to which the tiger does not answer. And then he asks why the woman cares so much about her. In response, the voice says that a tiger can't be honest with himself, to which Spencer replies that she shouldn't say stupid things. Suddenly, an old man appears right in front of the tiger and says that the beast is not a sacred animal, but just a creature that kills people. Rising from the ground, Spencer asks again. The old man says that he is from Mount Conger, and then asks the tiger that he didn't think that he didn't know about the ghost that is always next to him. As it turns out, the ghost, who was previously a man but was killed by a tiger, does not leave him, but bewitches other people and leads them to the tiger. Spencer meanwhile remembers that the warriors from Mount Conger are keenly aware of the theme of ghosts, and then he orders his ghost to come out, and a woman appears next to him. Pointing his sword at the tiger, the old man shouts that he is betting the honor of the warrior Conger, and promises to cut out the beast's throat. Spencer sighs and turns to Hannah, telling her that this is all his fault, and that she needs to figure it out herself. The man asks the beast where it went as the ghost gets closer and closer to him, and then Hannah says that she will be his opponent, and her pendant starts to glow. Then a sword begins to appear from the pendant. Raising her hand, the ghost took out a sword from her pendant. Seeing this, the old man realized that this was a necklace where you could put absolutely anything, regardless of size. The man was surprised to think that this ghost could control him. After a short silence, he asked if he could ask a question. In response, Hannah said that they say that people who learn martial arts become too self-confident, and that once the old man pulled out his sword, the conversations are over. The man frowned and said that if she said so, then so be it. And then, using the dragon art technique, which created several clones of the man, he rushed to attack, thinking that this woman had lost her human essence anyway, and now the blades almost reached the ghost's head. Suddenly, the ghost blocked the blow of the real sword behind her back. The old man was surprised and exclaimed, "How could this be?" Hannah said that since he was so rude to the girl, she should pay him back with a worthy blow. Then she swung her sword and the man was thrown back. The old man's hand holding the sword began to shake, but the ghost did not retreat, and now her sword almost reached the man's face. But the man managed to block the blow, and their swords touched, creating a flash of light. The old man struggled to hold back the attack as the swords created sparks. Using the dragon arts again, the man exposed his pendant to the blow and moved to the side. But the ghost, asking where the old man was running away from her, and without looking, immediately pointed the tip of her sword to the side. And then she struck again, which pushed the opponent back. Ben called out to his teacher in fear. Meanwhile, his teacher stood leaning on his sword, his whole body shaking. The man thought with surprise how it was possible that he was losing to some ghost. Hannah, meanwhile, came closer to the old man, and he immediately raised his head. The woman prepared to strike again, and the old man wondered if she was a ghost at all. While Hannah fought the man, Chelsea sat on a rock near a field of wild wheat and ate her meat. Suddenly someone asked her if it was tasty, which made the girl shudder. And then she turned with her cheeks full and looked angrily at the speaker. Spencer told her to go to the fire because it was cold, and he noted to himself that the girl had an appetite no worse than his. Chelsea snorted in an offended manner, didn't answer, and turned away from the tiger. Not wanting to fall for such manipulations, the tiger said that if so, he would leave here, and said goodbye, and then added that he was not very pleased, so he would quickly forget about her. The girl did not expect such a reaction at all, and turned around in surprise. And then she ran after the tiger. The beast thought that it could not be otherwise, because she was just a child. Suddenly Spencer noticed something, and his eyes widened. Chelsea, not expecting the tiger to stop, gasped and cut herself on his leg. Raising her hand to her bruised nose, she asked why the tiger had stopped. Stepping forward, he told the girl to be quiet, and then he ordered whoever was hiding here to come out. Chelsea hid behind the tiger in fear. Suddenly someone said that he would not say unnecessary words, and then he ordered to leave the girl and go away, and then said that if he did this he would spare the tiger. Spencer noted that it looked like they were entering Black Soul territory. He looked at the girl and thought that he had assumed that this would happen, but he had not expected it to happen so quickly, and he began to think about what to do. And then the tiger suddenly asked if the speaker promised that he would not touch him if he gave him the girl, and thought that first he needed to survive, while the girl looked at the tiger in surprise. The Black Soul mockingly noted that the beast knew his place, and then replied that he kept his promises, and then once again ordered him to leave the girl and disappear. The girl called out to Spencer hesitantly. The tiger looked at Chelsea and ordered her to let him go. In a panic, the girl asked why he was doing this. Was it because she was angry? And then he said that she would not do it again and asked him not to do this to her. Looking sternly at Chelsea, Spencer said he didn't want to die here with her. And then he said that he, of course, became attached to her, but not so much as to die with her. And then, with a jerk of his leg, the tiger told the girl to accept her fate. And then the beast began to leave. Suddenly a dark shadow appeared behind the girl, who laughed and said that the white-blooded one would soon die. Meanwhile, Jeanne asked the old man, pointing the sword at his face, if he understood everything now, and then said that she would not ask him to believe her, but she wanted him to know that they did not want to harm this girl. And then she removed the sword from the man's face, while he remained silent. Sighing, the old man replied that what else could he do? Even if he didn't believe, he had to believe. With a smile on her face, the ghost said that it was good that he understood everything, because there is nothing more stupid than not knowing your place. And then she asked what the man was doing here with his student, to which the old man replied that they were here for spiritual training. Hearing this, the woman said that here you can find something that you can't find anywhere else. Standing up with the broken sword in his hands, the man said that she was right, and that was why they came here, believing the rumors. In response, the woman asked what kind of rumors. The old man said that since ancient times, many people have been dying in these places. Hearing this, Hannah asked the man to continue his story. The old man said that all the corpses were without limbs, and they cut the skin of their stomachs, as if they wanted to find something there. The woman's thoughts latched onto the phrase, wanted to find. Suddenly the ghost and the old man felt something. They looked around and noticed some green smoke rising from behind the trees. Hannah guessed that something seemed to have happened. Waving his sword, the Black Soul repeated the word white-blooded, as if savoring it. And then he said that for more than 200 years now, they have been saying that there are no more of them left. Smiling, he said that in this world there was no one more fortunate than him. He reached out his hand to her. The girl looked at him with an empty gaze, and the Black Soul told her to go with him. Throwing Chelsea over his shoulder, the Black Soul went somewhere. The girl meanwhile recalled how, upon seeing her, all the boys began to shout insults and throw stones at her, and told her to leave their village. She remembered how after she looked back at them, they would run away in fear. She recalled how one day she held out her hands with a chipped bowl, asking for food. But instead of helping, they poured slop on the girl. And then they asked her how she dared to come here, and said that she was bringing bad luck to their village. She recalled how she had to sit outside in winter without warm clothes. But suddenly one day someone approached her. As it turned out, a nobleman approached her. This nobleman took her with him, and he gave her clothes that were not torn. He also gave her a warm blanket. But suddenly the woman who was in the room with her threw a pillow at her and shouted at her to go away and not to dare come near her. So the girl began to work as a servant in the house of this gentleman, where she was constantly shouted at. She recalled how one day, when she was unloading a cart, one of the servants said that if she did not finish it in the given time, then she would not see food that day. Then the girl thought that she needed to work harder so that she wouldn't get kicked out, and that she needed to be harder because she didn't look like them. Suddenly she heard some girls congratulating one of them on the fact that she had been proposed to, and that she would now have a family. Chelsea decided to watch them through the fence while the girl bragged that her future husband gave her an engagement ring. Suddenly someone called out to the girl and asked what she was doing there, and then she was beaten for being idle. Sitting on the roof at night, Chelsea thought about love, marriage, family, and imagined that the star was her husband, and then she told herself that she heard what those girls were talking about. She said, looking at the sky, that she didn't quite understand everything, but these were very beautiful words. And then she asked the stars and the moon if she too could get married, if she would have the only one who would protect her and scold others for scolding and beating her. She asked if she would have someone who would love her and do everything for her, if she would have only her husband. Thinking about this, Chelsea laughed, swinging her legs. Then one day the gentleman said that she should marry Spencer. Hearing this, the girl blushed. While doing business and remembering her future marriage, she blushed every time. Chelsea thought about what her husband would be like. She didn't want him to have a cool look. She didn't demand some angel as a husband. The girl smiled, thinking that she too would have a family, and that she would no longer be alone, and that her husband would be a tiger. Chelsea learned from one of the girls that her husband would be a tiger. This girl said that it is unknown when he will decide to eat her, his bride. Hearing this, the girl became frightened. When she was being prepared to be sent to the mountain, she was no longer happy, but thought only about the fact that she, a homeless person, was taken into a house, dressed in clean clothes, given a room, just for this moment, and therefore, in the end, she could not become a person. She was only a ghost in human form. Meanwhile, the black soul reached its refuge, and he struck the stone with his sword. Taking the knife in his hands, he said that the girl's blood and body would belong to him, and that it would be bliss. Coming closer to Chelsea, the black soul said that he would not abandon her like the tiger did. Taking her head and preparing to plunge a knife into it, he said that she should not be sad, but that she should be reborn again. And so the tip of the knife began to approach Chelsea, but she thought only about the fact that she did not hate Spencer, because meeting and being friends with him, his warm hugs, what he did for her, what he gave her, made her happy. And so the girl prepared to die with a smile on her face. But there was no knife blow, and the crippled black soul fell to the ground. As it turns out, Spencer came out of nowhere and tore his arm off. The black soul screamed furiously, cursing at the tiger, and the tiger in turn called out to Hannah, still holding his hand in his teeth. And suddenly some black smoke appeared behind the girl, and out of it came Hannah and asked Chelsea if she was okay. Turning around, the girl asked who this woman was and what was going on here. The woman replied that her name was Hannah, and that she was a ghost who never left Spencer. In response, the girl said that her husband hated her. In response to this, the ghost said that this creature was very strong and that it was probably a strategic move. And then she added that the tiger treasured the girl very much, which made her shudder a little and say that then he said that everything was not like that at all. Hiding behind the invisibility cloak, Hannah urged Chelsea to look at the beast, to look at how it was trying to protect her. And then she added that the enemy was much stronger than Spencer, while the tiger fought fiercely with the black soul. Looking at this battle, at Spencer, the girl began to remember her dreams about whether she would have the one and only. She wondered if she would have someone who would protect her and scold others for scolding her or hitting her. Remembering these questions that she asked the stars and the moon, she burst into tears. Chelsea burst into tears and said she didn't even know that, before adding that she would be more obedient from now on. Hannah didn't answer, but just looked at the girl with a smile, and then she took off her robe and began to throw it over the girl, saying that it was dangerous here, and they needed to leave, to which Chelsea tried to object. While Spencer was still fighting fiercely with the black soul, the ghost said that the tiger could not fight with full force because the girl might get hurt. Having accepted this argument to leave quite reasonably, she disappeared under her cloak, calling her husband at the end. A second later, Hannah and Chelsea seemed to have disappeared, and the tiger thought that now he could finally fight at full strength. And then he began to concentrate energy in his mouth. And then the beast shot this energy at the black soul, causing it to fly away and knocking its sword out of its hands. The black soul sensed danger in this action, but before the soul could come to its senses, Spencer slammed his head into the ground with his paw, breaking the stone. But suddenly blood fell on this muzzle, from which red steam came out, and the tiger suddenly jumped away from his opponent. Then the black soul stood up, laughing, and his hair began to fall apart. Suddenly there were rat teeth, and he said that the tiger was not bad, but still remained a pitiful animal. As it turned out, the black soul's true form was a rat, and he said that he would rip out the tiger's limbs and pull out all of his limbs. Seeing its true form, Spencer thought of it as a furless rat with blood that had turned into poison, and then called the rat a bloodthirsty creature. Suddenly, the drops of blood that had spread across the cave floor began to take shape. Seeing this, the tiger was very surprised. The rat said that the beast had not taken into account his strength, and suddenly a bunch of small rats began to form from his blood, which rushed forward with a vile squeal. The blood rats rushed in a crowd at the tiger, and their leader shouted that the tiger would not escape from him alive. Spencer then struck one of the blood rats, causing it to burst immediately. The blood of this rat got on the tiger's paw and immediately began to burn, which caused pain to the animal. Seeing this, the rat laughed and exclaimed that it was all useless. The army of blood rats charged at the tiger again, while their leader shouted that a pathetic creature like Spencer would never be able to stop him. As the rats rushed at the tiger and burst, leaving behind their burning blood, the rat screamed that the beast would not escape from the rats made from his blood, and that the tiger should die a miserable death, as was destined for him. After some time, the tiger was covered in blood, which is why he began to become paralyzed. While the blood rats continued to mercilessly pounce on the tiger's leg, Spencer thought about how things could have been different if she had been here now. Suddenly the beast cried out that it was in pain. The rat noticed that the tiger had stumbled and was open to attack, and then he, shouting that he was caught, kicked Spencer in the face. From this blow the tiger flew back and hit the rock behind him. The rat screamed for the tiger to die slowly and painfully, and then a bunch of bloody rats pounced on the beast. Crushed by these rats, Spencer thought only that he had to endure it a little longer, and then he pushed away all these rats, concentrating energy in his mouth. But still, all these attacks did not pass without a trace, and the beast was already pretty battered, and vapors of this poisonous blood were coming from it. Chris was surprised to note that he was still bravely going against his attacks, and trying to run like a dog in water. Afterwards he pulled out his huge claws, and said that he would do him the honor of finishing him off himself. Calling his opponent a dirty rat, Spencer said he talked too much and for too long. Suddenly, Hannah attacked the rat from behind with a sword, and with a sharp movement of the sword, she made a deep cut on the enemy's neck, causing blood to flow out like a fountain. The woman told the rat that he was too reckless. Meanwhile, the black soul shook its head in panic, making grunting and gurgling sounds. Spencer said that he was taking too long to die, and indignantly told him to die already. Clutching the wound on his neck with his paw, the rat began calling his opponents small creatures, and then said that they dared to touch his body. Thinking that there would be no second chance, the tiger raised his paw, preparing to attack, and used the furious fist technique, causing his paw to glow with blue fire. And then the beast rushed at the enemy, who was discouraged by this, and so, when the tiger's paw was almost at the opponent's face, he used the furious fist technique. Rat, a second before that blow tore his head into pieces, screamed that he hated that damn tiger. The lower part of the rat's body, still intact, fell to the ground, while the edges of the wound glowed with blue lights. The blue fire slowly but surely burned the body of the scythe, and then this fire flared up and engulfed the entire remaining body of the black soul. Meanwhile, dawn was already breaking outside. As he left the cave, Spencer breathed a sigh of relief and said that he almost died there. And when he came out of the cave, he noticed with surprise that it was already light. Hannah, holding the rat's sword and his eyes in her hands, decided to draw her tiger's attention to what interesting things they were able to obtain, and then said that they would be very useful to them in the future. Tiger asked where Chelsea was now, to which the ghost replied that she took her to an old man in the village and told them to go to the village. Then she said that if the beast suddenly died, then she would also lose her power, and if that happened, then all these creatures would attack the girl. Tiger frowned at the ghost and said nothing while she smiled innocently. And then Spencer admitted that it was true, and wondered what kind of feeling had awakened in him. Hannah then suggested that they go to the girl, to which the tiger only chuckled thoughtfully. Spencer thought that as soon as he left the mountain, this happened immediately, and this would happen again. And with such strength, he was not sure that he could protect the girl, but by killing this monster, he received an eye with the ability to transform, and wondered if this was an accident. Looking at the eyes, he thought that if he were to transform into a human, he would be able to use the sword he had received, and would be able to fight stronger opponents. He also noticed that he would finally be able to use the technique that he had been unable to master for so long, Flame Blue Flower. And he said out loud that before they went to Chelsea, he had some things to sort out. And then the tiger decided for himself that he should transform into a human. Meanwhile, the old man was walking with two children. Chelsea asked how far they still had to go, and then began to worry that her husband could not catch up with her. Turning around, the man said that the village was already behind the mountain, and said that they would wait for the tiger there. Suddenly Ben told Chelsea that the tiger could not be her husband. Then the girl, screaming and pulling the boy's hair, asked what he was talking about, and then said that if she said that the tiger was her husband, then he was her husband. Then she let the boy go, and said that if he told her to do something again, he would get into trouble, to which the boy replied, holding his head and crouching down on the ground, that he understood everything. Suddenly, a man in a hat turned to the old man and asked who it was. The man in the hat asked the old man, while his carriage was riding alongside, if he was Joshua from Congo, and the old man asked if it was Harvard. And then, folding his hands in a welcoming gesture, the man said that he was expressing his respect to the senior student, to which the latter replied that there was no need for such formalities. Harvard said it had been 10 years since he left Congo. The old man replied with a smile on his face that people from there will always remain family. The man suggested to the old man and the children that if they were heading in the same direction, they should go together, to which Joshua happily agreed. Meanwhile, something was happening on Mount Wulong while the sky was covered with clouds. One boar, drooling, shouted that their leader must make a decision because the number of people was growing. Another boar shouted that since there are more people, there are more animals that become food for them. And then they all shouted together, looking at the chief who had a tree growing on his back, that this was their family's business. And then they asked about who would take care of Mount Udun if their leader was gone. The boar chief thought about how he wanted to leave this place in peace, but there was no one to protect these helpless ones, and it would be too selfish to abandon them like this. Suddenly a raven flew up to the leader and whispered something in his ear. Then someone said for the boars to disperse, and a red paw stepped onto the land of the boars. The tiger came closer and closer to the leader until he did not open his eyes. Spencer noted out loud that this was their first meeting in 30 years. The chief of the boars said that he hardly came to get even for the past, and asked what had suddenly happened to the keeper of the mountain. Thinking about how petty this boar was, the tiger asked why he suddenly started feeling nostalgic, and then said that he came to find the flame flower. The boar's thoughts caught on the phrase, flame flower, and he asked himself why the keeper needed this valuable medicinal herb. The chief said that he had this flower, and the tiger thought that he doubted that he had it, but still he had it. Then the boar said that the tiger must do him a favor, and if he refused, he would not take even a single stone from this mountain. Spencer asked again about the favor. The chief said that if the tiger was the one who defeated that bloodthirsty rat, then it would not be difficult for him. The beast reluctantly agreed and asked what he wanted to ask for. Squinting slyly, the boar said that it was not difficult at all, and then added that he just needed to follow his son and help him. Some time later, many wild boars began to descend from the mountain. The tiger was walking somewhere with them. Hannah noted that there were a lot of wild boars here, and then asked if they had accidentally fooled the tiger. Spencer replied that there was nothing to be done. He couldn't fight all these pigs alone, and the main thing was that he got this flower. And then he added that they would see what would happen, and if something unexpected happened, they would run away. The son of the boar chief turned to the crowd and said that they had arrived, and then added that there would soon be a signal, and ordered them to wait. Spencer remembered that his son's name was Walter, and then asked his son if it was time for him to tell him what this was all about. Walter told them not to worry, as they would be with them, but then added that they should know that they were putting their lives on the line. Suddenly a raven flew from above, and the tiger and the boar quickly looked up. The chieftain's son noticed their target appear on the horizon, and they quietly peered out to watch the approaching carriage. The tiger noticed that these were human carts, and doubts crept into his head. Taking a closer look, Spencer noticed that these carts were guarded by Taoists, that is, warriors with spiritual powers. Noticing this, he asked Walter if they really wanted to rob the things that the Taoists were guarding, and then said that the boars were not only rumored to be fools. Walter replied that that was why he said they were putting their lives on the line, and then he said that their target was the sphere of increase that the Taoists carried in their carts. Spencer was very surprised to hear that they wanted to steal the enlargement ball, because it is a potion that can increase the territory, something that many people dream of. The stunned tiger said that they had all gone crazy. Suddenly he said that he was leaving, to which the chieftain's son replied that they had already made a deal, in response to which the tiger asked what kind of wise man would bet his life on this. Walter said that it was too late to wash his hands and that there was no way out of it. Meanwhile, the leader of the boars stood on the top of the mountain. Suddenly he assumed that the operation had already begun, and then he thought about how this matter would determine whether they would be able to cope with the consequences. And then he assumed that, regardless of whether they take this ball or not, it is unlikely that people will sit idly by. Rather, they will go and attack them in response. I thought that these little people would come not only for them, but also for their territory, and their clan would be defeated and disappear. Suddenly Walter shouted that everything would have happened like this if Spencer hadn't come. In response to this, all the other boars began to praise the tiger. Shouting that they were fighting for Spencer, many boars began running down the mountainside to meet the crew. The Taoists noticed the approach of a herd of boars and shouted that they were being attacked by the creatures and that everyone else should prepare for the attack. Meanwhile, the tiger was still standing on the dais, while one of the Taoists shouted for everyone else to protect the carts. Suddenly, this same Taoist noticed a tiger standing on a hill and said that it was Spencer, the guardian of the mountain, and suggested that he was the leader of these boars. And then the same man shouted that they had to kill him, and in response the tiger shouted, having figured out the plan of the boar leader, that he was a bastard old man. Meanwhile, the chief, rejoicing and mocking Spencer, said that now all the enemies would be aimed at him, and that he should try to dodge their attacks, and then laughed loudly. Meanwhile, the Taoists fought fiercely with the boars, cutting their bodies with swords. The already out-of-breath warrior noticed that there was no end to these boars, while a pile of boar corpses lay next to him. A whole mountain had already formed from the corpses of the boars killed by the Taoists, but the boars still did not stop their advance. Hannah noticed that the boar chief had set them up, and then asked Spencer what they would do, and then suggested that they could go back to the mountain right away. The tiger replied irritably that this was exactly what their opponents were after, and he could not afford to give them what they wanted. And then, preparing to enter the battle, he told the ghost that their opponents were now Taoists, and therefore she must be more careful. Covering herself with her invisibility cloak, Hannah replied that she understood. Meanwhile, a gentleman sitting in one of the carts noticed that the warriors outside still could not calm down. As it turned out, it was Harvard, who said he would go there alone and then ordered Joshua to stay inside with his students. Meanwhile, Ben and Chelsea were sitting at the table eating, and an old man was sitting next to them. As soon as one of the Taoists noticed that his master had left, he told him that he could rest, because they could handle it themselves, in response to which Harvard only dismissively hissed. While the Taoists were still chopping the boars into pieces, the man asked what was going on, and then he took out a small bell from his sleeve. And then he began to raise his hand with this bell up and ring it, and suddenly a huge wave of force came from the master, which began to push the boars away. As the boars flew back, Spencer, recognizing the sound, remembered something. Noticing this technique, the tiger realized that this gentleman was the leader of these Taoists. Suddenly, Harvard noticed something below and looked up. Saying that there was a big animal in there, the man turned to Spencer, causing him to cower in fear. Taking a talisman out of his sleeve, the gentleman said with a sinister smile on his face that this tiger would make a good skin. And then he used the talisman, and some things that looked like tree branches flew out of it. Luckily, Spencer managed to dodge this attack, and the branch did not hit him. The man frowned, surprised to think that this dirty animal had managed to dodge. Looking at the branch next to him, the tiger thought that if this thing had hit him, he would have died already. The beast noted that this was, without a doubt or exaggeration, a powerful spiritual force and a strong blow to whom. Looking at the master, who took out even more talismans from his sleeve, the tiger concluded that he was a very skilled fighter. The man gestured with his hand, saying that the beast would definitely not be able to avoid this, and his eyes turned orange. Using the 1,000-strike power technique, the man used the talismans, which now stood in a semicircle above him, and branches appeared from them, which now headed towards the tiger at great speed. The tiger did not expect such an attack at all. Because he did not expect this, he was unable to dodge this attack, and several branches caught up with him, but were unable to pierce him as the tiger deftly ran away from them. The man laughed evilly, saying that if the tiger stood there even for a second, his life would end. Continuing to mock the tiger, the master noticed something was wrong. As it turned out, Spencer was quite successful in dodging these branches, which in turn hit either the boars or the ground. Harvard frowned even more, calling the tiger a sneaky cat. Suddenly he screamed that he didn't give a damn about his skin. Now he would turn him into mincemeat, and then his eyes turned bright yellow, and the bell glowed even brighter. Suddenly branches began to emerge from the ground around the tiger, bending towards him at the ends. Soon these branches began to come even closer together, and become entangled, forming a cocoon around the beast. But Spencer didn't despair, and used his furious claw technique, causing his paw to glow with blue fire. By using this technique, the tiger was able to burn his wooden cocoon with his blue fire. Suddenly, at the same time, all the Taoists and all the boars stared at this bright blue flash. Meanwhile, a tiger began to approach them, its eyes glowing with an angry red light, and sticks sticking out of its back. Harvard wondered in bewilderment how this beast could have survived his most powerful attack. And then he thought about how an animal could have such incredible strength. Spencer thought about how much he didn't want to use this technique, and then asked Hannah if she had found what they needed. A second later, the ghost appeared next to the tiger, saying that she had found everything. And then she worriedly asked when he managed to get so badly hurt, and if everything was okay with him. Spencer replied that he was dying. Meanwhile, the man shouted that the tiger's strength was running out, which meant that he was now definitely at the very bottom, and then laughed evilly. The woman said that they had already gotten what they wanted, and suggested that they leave here, and then covered the tiger with her invisibility cloak. The gentleman noticed with surprise that this was the power of invisibility, and then, looking at where the woman and the tiger had stood just a second ago, he shouted and asked where they had gone. One of the Taoists ran up to the master and said that they had a problem, while he stared angrily at the now empty space. The Taoist said that their ball was missing, and now Harvard responded with a look, and turned to the man in annoyance and surprise. He wanted to ask what he was talking about, but he couldn't finish speaking because he began to choke on his own blood. The man's disciple asked him worriedly if he was okay, to which he held out his hand in an attempt to stop the Taoist, and said that he was not to be worried about, while he himself crouched closer to the ground and spat out blood, then added that he was simply weak. Spitting out blood, the gentleman thought that if he lost the ball that night, he would be expelled from the community. Suddenly he remembered Hannah, who used the power of invisibility before his eyes. Starting to rise from the ground, Harvard ordered everyone to start looking for the thief who stole their ball, to which the student replied that there were only 3 of them left, and they would not be able to deal with Spencer. In response, the man angrily shouted that they had seen how weak the tiger had become after his attack, since he had barely survived it, and then said that while he was recovering, 1 Taoist should stay with him, and the other 2 should go after the beast. And then he ordered them not to let him out of their sight, and at the same time a small handle opened the carriage door. Chelsea looked out of the carriage with concern, and asked if they were talking about her husband now. Meanwhile, Spencer and Hannah reached the flower field, and the tiger said that the Taoists must be in trouble there. And then he said he wanted to see the look on Harvard's face, and after he thought about it, he said it even made him feel good, and he started laughing. The ghost shouted, saying that now was not the time for laughter, and that the tiger needed to think about himself. The woman noticed that the animal was getting worse, and wondered what had happened. Suddenly Spencer fell to the ground, and the woman called his name in concern. Having fallen to the ground, the tiger suddenly began to vomit blood. Noticing this, Hannah said that this would not do, and that she needed to get those sticks out of the tiger's body, to which he, groaning a little, told her to do it. Suddenly Spencer's scream shook the entire forest. Taking one of the sticks out of the tiger's back, the woman noticed something bad about it, while the tiger meanwhile angrily muttered that he should have been warned before taking out this stick. Then the ghost said that these sticks had taken root in the body of the beast, and her hand shook slightly with fear. Sweating and emitting steam, the tiger told the woman to continue. The ghost tried to object, saying that he was already bleeding heavily, to which Spencer replied that if he waited any longer, those branches would suck all the blood out of him, and if she got them, it would be better than that slow and painful death. However, these arguments did not seem too convincing to Hannah, and she again found herself objecting, to which the tiger said that she knew he could handle it. And then again, but more insistently, he ordered her to pull out these branches. After a slight hesitation, the woman nevertheless took hold of one of the sticks, and, saying that it would be very painful, began to pull them out of the animal's body. Meanwhile, the Taoists were following Spencer and Hannah. Suddenly one of the Taoists dropped to the ground and said that they had found this tiger. The other noticed that this tiger was very badly injured. And then this same Taoist told another to be careful, even though this tiger was badly wounded. In response, the first Taoist said that he knew what the mountain master's strength was, so he was sure that he was now dying. The first Taoist rose from the ground and said that the ghost next to the tiger had priceless power, and if they took this power away from her and returned the ball, they would be promoted. Meanwhile, Hannah had removed all the sticks from Spencer's body, and then she thought that even though she had gotten all the sticks, the tiger had lost consciousness, because he had lost a lot of blood, and then she decided that she still had to wake the beast up. Suddenly, someone's voice sounded from behind the ghost, asking who it was, to which the woman immediately turned around. The 2 Taoists finally reached the tiger, and one of them said that although the tiger was breathing, he was sure that these were its last breaths, and Hannah, screaming, asked how they found it. and then she took out a sword from her necklace. Attacking the ghost, the Taoist defiantly asked if she really wanted to protect her master. Shouting that this was all very funny, the Taoists pounced on Hannah, their swords pointing straight at her. Meanwhile, Harvard was in some dark space and was meditating while some blue vapors were coming out of it. Exhaling blue smoke, the man thought that he had restored his strength to the 3rd level. And then he decided that this was enough to return to the fight. The Taoist, who had been ordered to stay by the master's side, was now guarding the carriage, and he lamented that they were being attacked not even by people, but by some kind of animals, and then remarked that it wasn't even funny. Suddenly something passed the crew window, and some bright flash came out from there. As it turned out, it was Harvard, who was thinking that although he had not yet fully recovered his strength, there would be assistance next to him, and then, heading straight to the tiger, he remembered the stone on the ghost's neck, and assumed that it was most likely priceless. And then, with a greedy smile on his face, he suggested that there were many other valuables in this stone. Anticipating what would happen next, Harvard thought that if he thought of a strong tiger and a ghost who had power over that stone, then he would be the richest man. Sometime later, the man finally noticed the body of a tiger lying in a flower field. The man noticed with delight that his prey was lying right before his eyes. Meanwhile, in the carriage where Joshua, Ben, and Chelsea were sitting, there was some kind of commotion, and the boy told the teacher that the girl had disappeared. In response, the man asked again, and the boy replied that she said that she was going to pee in the bushes, but after that he did not see her. Going outside, the old man quietly cursed and exclaimed that it was very dangerous in the mountains. Meanwhile, Chelsea was walking somewhere through the forest up the mountain. Sweating a little from the climb, she thought about how she was sure those people were talking about her husband, and although she didn't know why they fought, she knew for sure that her husband had come for her. So the girl decided that now she would go to him. It was already getting dark, and Spencer was still lying in the flower field, and the flowers were covered in his blood. And Harvard came closer to the tiger's body. The man grinned and assumed that the animal had died while pulling out its branches, then thought that it was obvious and lamented how boring it was. Looking to the side, the Taoist said that since the tiger died, it meant that the ghost had also evaporated, which meant that her little thing was somewhere here and it had to be found. After examining the area around the tiger's body, the man was surprised to note that the necklace he was looking for was nowhere to be found. Starting to shake with anger, Harvard assumed that one of his students had already taken the necklace. The man swore loudly and in a fit of anger, using the talisman, struck the tiger on the neck. The blow sent Spencer's head flying off his body and rolling across the ground. The man thought furiously about how this bastard dared to steal his thing. And then, assuming that this Taoist could not have run far, Harvard set off in a bright flash to look for him. Sometime later, someone approached the tiger's head. As it turned out, it was Chelsea who took Spencer's head in her hands, and then she smiled weakly and turned to her husband. Bringing the head back to the body, she asked if he had decided to play a joke on her again. The girl said that she would not let herself be deceived again. After attaching the head to the body, Chelsea sat down next to him and told the tiger to stop teasing him and get up quickly. But then the head fell off the body again, and she rolled across the flower field. The girl stared at the head in surprise, and then she picked it up again, saying again that she had asked him to stop making these jokes. Chelsea reattached the head to the body and said that Spencer had done a good job and should stand up. But the beast did not get up, and his head fell off again. Then the girl burst into tears. And then she burst into loud sobs near the lifeless body of the tiger. Meanwhile, Hannah was carrying Spencer on her shoulder, saying how heavy he was. Suddenly, she dropped it on the ground. The blow caused the tiger to suddenly open its eyes. The beast rose abruptly and wondered when he had managed to pass out, and the ghost was glad that he finally woke up. Suddenly, Spencer noticed something strange about the woman. As it turned out, Hannah was slowly evaporating. A few hours earlier, she had fought with 2 Taoists. The sword swings flickered in the air like a bright flash. One of the Taoists was amazed at the power of this ghost, and replied that at this rate they would lose. Suddenly an idea came to his mind, and then he pulled 2 knives out of his sleeve. And saying that if the tiger dies, the ghost will also die, the man threw these 2 knives into the tiger's body. And now there was a second left, and these knives would plunge into Spencer's head, killing him. But suddenly Hannah runs up and protects the beast with her body, and the knives end up in her back. The Taoist who launched the knives notes that sacrificing herself to save her master is the only way for her to survive. Suddenly the ghost says that she has been messing with them for too long and screams to end it all. Turning to Spencer, she says that he's going to be in a little pain now. and then a huge amount of purple smoke starts to come out of Hana. One of the Taoists looks at this with bewilderment. The other one, angry, asks if she really decided to use illusions, and then says that she is not his equal and attacks her with a sword. The first Taoist tries to stop his comrade. Suddenly the ghost's eyes light up with a bright flash.
A purple light engulfed everything around and began to destroy the Taoist's body. His comrade extended his hand towards him, and the corners of his eyes turned red. When his comrade disappeared, the remaining Taoist fell to the ground and screamed in frustration. His hands were shaking and stained with his comrade's blood, while Hana moved closer. She said that she had, of course, spent her strength, but not to the extent that she would lose to swindlers like them. With tears in his eyes, the man looked at the ghost and thought that she was invincible. And then he prayed that she would not kill him because he was just following orders. The woman asked the Taoist if, after all he had done, he was now asking for mercy. Hitting his forehead, the man fell down in a bow before Hana and said that he would do whatever she asked if she would spare him. In response to this, the ghost asked if the man had a talent for magic, and upon hearing this, the man's eyes widened. And then he answered, raising his head, on whose forehead a bloody mark was visible, that he had the ability for magic and he would do anything. Then the woman took out the eye that remained after the victory over the black soul, and a spell appeared from it, and she told the Taoist to look at this spell and immediately get to work as quickly as possible, and she would supply him with the necessary raw materials. And then she, looking sternly at the man, added that what he made, he would eat himself, and therefore he needed to be very careful. After hearing about what happened before his awakening, Spencer said that what she gave him to eat was what turned the Taoist into a copy of the tiger. And then, looking at the ground, he sadly noticed that the ghost had to suffer greatly because of him. Reaching out to the animal, Hana said that when the tiger lost consciousness, she gave him that ball, and it seemed that the ball was really effective, since Spencer was able to survive with such wounds. Suddenly, she fastened her necklace around the beast's neck, saying that the tiger only had to absorb all the beneficial properties of the ball. As the ghost continued to slowly evaporate, she said that this was the last thing she could help Spencer with, and then added that she had a lot of fun. Tiger noticed that Hana just needed a little rest, and then asked why she was talking as if she was saying goodbye to him. Leaning his forehead against the tiger's nose, the ghost said that he was afraid to leave him alone. Suddenly, she began to evaporate even more actively, telling him to be careful while she was gone, but she didn't have time, and this phrase was cut off halfway. Before she could finish speaking, Hana disappeared, and Spencer was left sitting alone on the ground. After a while, the tiger quietly spoke to the ghost to come back quickly and that he would wait for her. Meanwhile, the boar leader was told how their recent operation had gone, which clearly did not please him. His subordinates pressed themselves slightly to the ground, afraid to utter a word. The chief thought angrily that Spencer, despite the chaos, was able to up and run away with the magic ball, and then he noted that he underestimated him, and then thought that as soon as the tiger healed his wounds and regained his strength, he would come for his head. And then he furiously shouted to his subjects to quickly go look for him, because they could not let their sacrifices be in vain, and then added that Spencer was seriously wounded and therefore could not run far. And then, still screaming, he commanded the boars to find him and kill him, because if they didn't, he would tear off all their heads. Spencer, meanwhile, was climbing his mountain. He soon reached the pond where he was with Chelsea and called out to Anthony. Then the head of a catfish appeared from the water and asked if Spencer had come to see him. And then, seeing that the tiger was covered in blood, he loudly asked in surprise what had happened to him. The beast replied that he did not have time and that he would explain later, and then said that they needed to leave here. Anthony replied that since Spencer said so, he would follow his order. And then he asked irritably if this meant that that bastard Dustin would also go with them. Suddenly, a root began to emerge from the ground, and a surprised cry was heard from somewhere. As it turned out, this root turned out to be talking, and by all appearances, it was that same Dustin, who later said that this catfish 100% wanted to leave him, and then added that it would be better for them not to take such heartless people with them. Spencer sighed heavily and closed his eyes as Anthony and Dustin bickered and insulted each other. Meanwhile, the panther, resting in Spencer's cave, woke up and stretched. Suddenly, he heard something and twitched his ear. And then he suddenly stood up with shining eyes, declaring that Spencer was back. And then, saying that he was sure that it was his scent, the panther ran towards the exit of the cave. As he quickly approached the cave exit, He laughed and then said that at last the impudent fellow had shown up. And then he added that he would finally tear it apart today, but then he noticed something was wrong. And he braked abruptly. As it turned out, Spencer had indeed returned to his cave, and noticing the panther, looked at him questioningly. The panther stood and looked at the tiger in amazement, and then, still in amazement, he called the tiger by name. And then he screamed and asked what kind of creature dared to touch Spencer. In response, the tiger quietly and calmly asked what difference it made to the panther who had wounded him. Hearing this, the panther fell silent in surprise, his eyes wide. And then he, scratching his head, began to mumble some answer, making it up as he went along, and when he finally came up with it, he said that because of this, he could no longer fight the tiger in a fair fight. In response to this, the tiger said that the only thing he needed now was a panther and this fight, in response to which the panther asked where he was going. Spencer replied that he was a little busy at the moment and asked the panther to come later, and then he could play with him. The panther opened his eyes in surprise and asked when he should come, since he had already been waiting for this meeting for a long time. The tiger replied that if he had waited so long, then he should be happy, because soon he would be able to fight, because soon those with whom he could do this would come here. In response to this, the panther asked who would come, to which the tiger said that maybe it would be the Taoists, or maybe those pigs from Mount Wulong. Then the interlocutor asked in surprise that Spencer had fought with the Taoists, and his partner only looked at the tiger in surprise. Hearing this, the woman said that it was amazing to stay alive after the battle with the Taoists. Leaving the couple, Spencer said that he had a lot to do, and therefore the panther should find a way to entertain himself. Panther was about to call Spencer when his partner suddenly shoved him in the face with her hip. Then the woman turned to the tiger, asking if he could listen to her, and then said that he was being pursued by his enemies, and besides, he had a lot of wounds, and he was alone. Not understanding what the woman was getting at, Spencer asked what it mattered if he was alone and wounded. Then the woman suggested that the tiger unite with her master, that is, the panther, and then both animals asked again. The woman said that her master wanted to measure his strength with him, but of course, after he had healed his wounds. The tiger thought that there was no guarantee that he would reach his hiding place before the Taoists or the pigs found him, and this offer was more opportune than ever. The woman asked what Spencer thought about the proposal. The tiger thought it was a good offer, but then he refused out loud, saying that he couldn't trust them. And then he added that he did not want to continue on his way, fearing that someone would hit him in the back, in response to which the panther got angry and said that he was not so mean until the woman put her hand in front of him. Then she suddenly started taking something out of her sleeve, asking if Spencer was familiar with it. Next, the woman found a small sign in her hand, and upon seeing it, the tiger exclaimed in surprise. The panther asked what this thing was, to which his companion asked him to remain silent. Spencer thought that this was a plaque that directly connected the life of the person whose name was written there, and he asked out loud what she was going to do next. Then the woman suddenly bit her finger. And then she wrote something on the tablet with her blood and said that she would write her name and the name of her master there. Suddenly, the panther felt that something was happening to his body. And then while the beast was still perplexed, the woman handed the sign to Spencer. Spencer's eyes widened in surprise, and he thought that the woman had definitely gone crazy if she had written her name there. Noticing that the tiger was doing nothing, she asked what he was thinking about, and told the tiger that he understood that if he had this sign, they would not be able to harm him. In response, Spencer said that the fact that she wrote their names on it meant that she was giving their lives into his hands, and then asked where she got such courage, because she knew what he could do with this tablet. Then the panther intervened in the conversation, saying that Spencer was not such a coward as to threaten them with this sign, to which his companion agreed with a smile. Turning away from the couple, Spencer said that he didn't need such a thing, because it would only burden him, and then began to walk away from them. The woman and her master stood still, and then the panther hesitantly called the tiger's name. Suddenly, the tiger turned around and asked why they were still standing, since they had a long journey ahead of them. Hearing this, the panther joyfully turned to his companion. And then he ran up to the tiger and said that since the tiger was unable to cope alone, he would help him. And then they all set off on their journey together. Sometime later, the company decided to take a break. Lying on the ground, Spencer thought that they had been walking for several days without rest, and the woman did not look tired at all. And then he noted that this woman was of a higher level than he thought. Then Spencer called Hillary's name, and she answered. Afterwards, he asked if she could teach him how to hide his spiritual power. Hillary noted that it was not difficult for her to train the tiger to do this, and then asked what he would give her in return. Hearing this, the tiger asked what she wanted. Stroking her master behind the ear, the woman replied that she didn't even know, and then said that she noticed that Spencer already guessed a lot about her, and it was difficult to lure her with anything. And then, pulling the panther by the cheek, she said that her owner, who was sleeping peacefully like a baby, was very easy to lure. Hearing this, Spencer realized that Hillary had chosen to accompany her master all her life, although it was unclear why she chose such a fool. And suddenly she asked the tiger if he had a Dobong Wan ball, which surprised the tiger. Looking at the woman, he wondered how she could have found out about this. Could she really know what was inside? Suddenly, seeing the tiger's reaction, Hillary clapped her hands and said that she had been sitting and guessing all this time. But it seemed she had guessed correctly. And then she explained that she had lived a long life, and therefore she had a very developed sense of smell for such things. After replying that he understood, Spencer thought that it was a shame to give up the ball just for this. Then the woman took a book out of her sleeve and said that if the tiger gave her this ball, then in return he would receive a sacred book in which very powerful forces were hidden. And then, to the tiger's surprise, she said that this book was very difficult to master, but if he succeeded, he could easily raise his level to Shinsu. And then he thought about how people like him only have 6 levels of power, and all magical creatures like him dream of rising to the level of Shinsu. Then Spencer thought that no matter how hard you try to raise your level, it is not given to everyone, because it is very difficult to get even 1 level. But if he has this book, then he can become many times stronger without raising his level. Hillary said, looking at the book, that it showed signs of the previous owner, and he was clearly at the highest level. The tiger swallowed when he heard that the owner of this book had not been able to fully master it. The tiger asked if the woman was really happy with this exchange, since she was losing a lot by giving him this book. Hillary replied that everything was fine, but in addition she would like to ask Spencer to be more friendly with her master. The tiger was surprised by this request to be more friendly with the panther, because it meant that he needed to help him, since they were on the same level, but he still agreed. Suddenly, voices were heard in the forest, and Spencer noticed that it seemed like the pigs were already close. Turning around, the woman said that since they had discussed everything, let the tiger go forward. Spencer asked if the woman could handle it. In response, Hillary said that the tiger had big plans since he was going to that place, and then added that she trusted his owner. Spencer replied that he understood, mentally noting how much Hillary cared about the panther. The tiger then began to wake up the panther, tugging at his ear with his paw. Reluctantly, the panther woke up, saying that he had had such a good dream. Then Spencer said that it was time for them to go, in response to which the panther asked if it was really time already. Noticing that the tiger had already started to leave, he shouted for him to wait, and then turned to Hillary and called her. The woman said that she would soon catch up with them, but for now he should go ahead, otherwise he would lose sight of Spencer. Hearing this, the panther quickly ran after the tiger and shouted to the woman to catch up with him quickly. A little later, when the animals had already disappeared from sight, wild boars began to appear from the forest. Meanwhile, the tiger and the panther were already walking across the field, and the panther asked if what he had just eaten was a Dobongkwan ball, and then asked the tiger why he had given him such a thing, to which Spencer replied that in exchange for this ball, he had given something to Hillary. As the animals approached the tree, the panther became indignant, asking if that was really the whole reason. Looking around, the panther asked if they had come to the right place, since there was nothing here, while Spencer came closer and closer to the tree. Then he touched the tree with his paw, and then he released his spiritual powers straight into the tree. A second later, leaves began to appear on the bare branches of the tree. A little later, the tree was completely covered with leaves, and the panther joyfully asked if this was really a magic tree. Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to shake, and soon a staircase appeared in front of the panther. The tiger said that he had discovered this place by chance, and if he entered there, he would be able to fully master the power of the ball, and no one could stop him. Having finished speaking, Spencer began to descend. As he descended, the tiger thought that once he raised his level, no one would dare to encroach on his life, and no one else will suffer because of him. When the sun was already shining brightly, Hillary reached the same tree. The boars cried out angrily, asking how much longer they had to wait, since they had already waited 3 days. Turning around, the woman asked what they were going to do here. In response, the boars said that the woman should show them how to open this place, and they would go in there themselves. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to shake, and then an explosion ripped through the area next to the tree. A little later, it became possible to notice the silhouette of a person in the smoke. Hillary and the boars looked at the silhouette in surprise. And then the boars started shouting that this man smelled like Spencer, and if they caught him, they would be able to find out where he was. Suddenly, the man said that these boars were stupid, and then he declared that he was Spencer. Hearing this, the boars began to furiously ask how this was possible and how he turned into a human. Suddenly, a second later, the previously clear figure of the man became blurry, and the man thrust his sword into the body of one of the boars. All the other boars looked around at this scene in surprise, exclaiming in astonishment. Spencer thought that his physical abilities had also improved. Suddenly, the sword located in the boar's body began to suck the blood from this body. The man was surprised by this outcome and pulled out a sword, engulfed in a red glow, from the boar's almost completely drained body. Noticing this, the boars exclaimed in surprise that this was a sword sucking the blood of the victim. Spencer raised his sword and asked him how he liked the taste of blood. And then he thought that this sword was indeed terrifying in appearance, but it also had its advantages. The boars began to wonder if this Spencer had really leveled up and what they should do now. Suddenly, one of the boars cried out furiously that they should not be afraid, because they had once defeated a creature much stronger than him. The other boars turned to look at the speaker, who continued, saying that, besides, he was alone, which meant he was inferior to them in numbers. This speech inspired the boars, and they attacked the man. Spencer said that it was so obvious and that this was exactly what he had been waiting for. And then he raised his sword again, and then he slammed it into the ground with a sharp movement, and a dark vortex of fog appeared from around. After this, the whirlwind began to spread, to the surprise of the pigs. One of them tried to cheer them up again as the dark fog filled the entire space. Soon this fog spread so much that the boars could no longer see each other and were suffocating in it. Then one of them shouted for them to follow his voice, but no one responded. Suddenly the cries of pigs were heard ahead, and suddenly his brother appeared in front of the boar, with blood flowing from his eyes, and he himself asked for help. Suddenly a bunch of dark hands appeared from the fog and reached out to the unfortunate man. And then they gave him a rare tug and pulled him somewhere deeper, while another boar screamed in panic and ran after him. He then looked up in shock to see a multitude of red eyes staring at him. A second later, the same hands grabbed this boar, and then all this dark fog began to be sucked into Spencer's sword. After a while, there was nothing left around. There were no boars, no bones. Spencer wondered if the sword was so thirsty for blood that it left no one alive. And then he noted that if he had been distracted for a second, he himself could have become a victim. And then he indignantly asked what kind of sword it was, and quietly mumbled that he should throw it away. Suddenly, Hillary remarked that it was extremely impressive, to which the man turned around. Putting the sword back into the necklace, he agreed with the woman's words. The woman congratulated Spencer on his power level increase. Then she asked him how he managed to turn into a human, to which the former tiger replied that it was a long story. Hearing this, Hillary asked if it was all because of his fiancée. Spencer shook his head and replied that it was not like that at all, and wondered irritably what the woman was even talking about. Then he said that he was going to Mount Wudu and asked if the woman would go with him. Hillary closed her eyes and replied that her master, like a turtle, was late everywhere, so she could not give an answer. And then she said that her master, as soon as he woke up, would immediately go look for Spencer, and so she handed him a bracelet in the shape of a snake. Spencer scratched his cheek and noticed with bewilderment that it was a love bracelet, which was only worn by couples in love. And then the man wanted to refuse, but suddenly one of the bracelets jumped off the woman's hand and flew straight at the man, and it immediately wrapped itself around his wrist. After this, Hillary said that she would give the other half to her owner, in response to which Spencer only made a dissatisfied face and chuckled. Then the woman said that the former tiger was unlikely to reincarnate anytime soon, and then asked if he could lend her one of his transformation gadgets. Spencer looked at Hillary in surprise and said that he didn't think a woman would need a transformation ball. In response, the woman objected, saying that she would need this ball. Without resisting for long, the man finally gave her the transformation ball, and Hillary thanked him in return. After that, Spencer said that he would then move on and that it was unknown when they would meet again, so she should take care of herself. And then he began to walk away into the distance, while the woman stood in this vacant lot watching him go. And then Hillary told herself that she didn't know when either, but they would definitely meet again. And then she, saying that she couldn't wait for this, began to approach the tree. Sometime later, somewhere in the mountains in the forest, night had already fallen. In this forest, there stood a red-haired guy inside. And then he asked why he had to be so stressed out about him, while the old servant stood behind him. Then the guy turned around and asked if Spencer really lived here. The elderly servant replied that this tiger definitely lives here, and every resident of the nearby village knows this place. Suddenly, someone approached the red-haired guy from behind, saying that Spencer was not in the cave, and therefore it seemed he guessed about their arrival and ran away. The dark-haired boy said that the tiger seemed to think that if he ran away, he would not be found. And then, putting the tiger's hair in some object, he said that if he put the tiger's hair in this compass, he would be able to find him wherever he was. And then the guy added that this compass has a downside, which is that if you use this compass, you can't use it for another 2 days. Then suddenly a beam of light burst out from this compass and began to point in a certain direction. The dark-haired guy noticed that it was the southeast direction, and the journey would take 3 days. The red-haired guy said that then they should hurry to get rid of this tiger as soon as possible and return. Then he loudly commanded the other Taoists to go to the southeast. The next day, someone yelled at the girl about how she dared to take the shamrock from his territory, to which the girl replied that she didn't know and apologized. But this someone continued and yelled that this shamrock belonged to him, and she should not even dream of taking even one leaf. Then the girl, shaking with fear and with tears in her eyes, said that if she did not bring the shamrock, her chickens would starve, and if they starved, they would not lay eggs. Then the interlocutor, hearing this, shouted how she dared to argue with him, which caused the girl to close her eyes. This someone said that in the end, people raise chickens only to eat them, which makes them really disgusting. As it turned out, this formidable defender of his territory was a hare, who, stamping his foot, said that while he, Spencer, was still alive, no one could take anything from this clearing. Looking uncertainly at the hare, the girl asked if perhaps she could take some of the shamrock after all. Then the hare, hearing this, jumped up sharply, raising his paws, and shouted that how dare she be insolent to him, and asked if she really wanted to test the sharpness of his claws on herself. Opening one eye slightly, the girl thought about what she had heard, that Spencer was a huge, menacing tiger, but later the rumors were wrong. Seeing the claws on the hare's paw, the girl closed her eyes again, thinking that these claws probably cut through the air and everything around them. Seeing that he had managed to intimidate the girl, Spencer grinned proudly. Suddenly, someone grabbed the hare by the ears and asked who this pseudo-Spencer was. As it turned out, it was the real Spencer, and the hare meanwhile began to flounder in his hands and furiously scream and threaten. Then the girl told the man that he couldn't do that, because he was Spencer, the owner of the mountain. Spencer, still shouting, declared that he was the master of this entire territory, and asked how this insignificant man dared to hold him by the ears. Not at all frightened by these threats, the real Spencer leaned over the hare and asked if this was really the case. And then he suddenly looked menacingly at the hare, and his tiger stripes appeared on his face. Seeing this, the hare became very frightened and began to beg for mercy. Having achieved the result, Spencer told the girl that she was taking the basket and everything in it with her, in response to which the girl asked if she really could do this. Then the man approached the girl, and handing her her basket, said that the owner of Mount Spencer was not so petty as to be angry over such nonsense. Having thanked her, the girl ran back to the village with the basket in her hands. The man watched her go with a smile on his face, when suddenly the hare, who had already come to his senses, gave a voice. Holding the hare higher, Spencer said that he needed to talk to him about something. And then he added that he hoped that the pseudo-Spencer's ears were not just for decoration. Spencer then asked if anyone had been in his cave. The hare immediately responded, continuing to shout that 3 days ago some Taoists came, were looking for something, and then went in a southeast direction. Scratching his chin, the man thought that 3 days ago he had just reached the tree, and it was located in the southeast direction, which meant they had definitely come for him. And then he thought that from now on, wherever he went, these Taoists would follow him. So he had to go to Mount Wudong and lose throats to everyone there. But then Spencer noted that first one needs to know the level of the Taoists and how many there are, and until then, one cannot act rashly. The man was thinking that he needed to find out what strength consisted of, but then a great idea came to him, and he laughed quietly. Then Spencer suddenly called the hare, to which he immediately responded. And then the man said menacingly that if he did as he was told, then he would let him go. And then the hare went into the forest to tell all the animals that the Taoists had caught Spencer and were going to Mount Wudong. The raven also heard this gossip. Hearing this, he immediately took off and flew. Sometime later, this raven flew to Mount Wulong and told the boar chief about this gossip. Hearing this, the other boars began to ask how it happened that Spencer was caught by the Taoists and that they were now coming here, and why they didn't kill him. Suddenly, the leader said that apparently the tiger did not want to die alone. Then one of the boars asked the chief what they should do in this case. The chief said that this tiger cub must have said that he hid the Dabangwan ball here. Then the boars, hearing this assumption, again shouted out loudly that he had really lied to the Taoists and that they could defeat the servants, but definitely not the Taoists. Suddenly, one of the boars shouted that they needed to run away from here, causing the leader's eyes to darken. Suddenly, he stamped his hoof, splitting the stone on which he stood. Frightened by this, the boars suddenly fell silent and bowed their heads. Then the leader of the boars, releasing steam from his mouth in anger, shouted that this place was from Rodan and asked where they would run away, leaving this place. And then he said that the local land was ideal for them and that they would use the terrain and take the enemies by numbers. And then he shouted even more furiously that they would cut down all the people and get the ball of Dabangwan, and then he ordered that everyone be called. Meanwhile, the red-haired Taoist, who was chasing Spencer, was thinking angrily that they had lost the trail. Had he really grown wings? And then he asked his dark-haired friend what the current location of this tiger was, to which the guy replied that Spencer was not moving now and was standing in one place. And then he said that the compass points to Mount Udong. Then the red-haired guy rushed even faster in that direction, saying that they would get there soon and he would personally rip the skin off this tiger cub. Meanwhile, the other Taoists were barely keeping up with the two men. Meanwhile, Spencer was indeed on Mount Udon. Standing on the mountain, he told himself that he had prepared everything, and now all that remained was to wait for everyone else to come. And then he declared that he would return everything that the boar leader had done to him in full. After some time, the Taoists and servants finally stopped, completely tired. The red-haired guy thought that they barely made it to this mountain and then wondered how they were going to look for this tiger on such a big mountain. But then he remembered that Spencer had been seriously injured by the Taoists, so if they split up, they would be able to find him. Suddenly, he noticed that someone was walking in the distance in the forest, and he immediately called out to this guy, who turned out to be Spencer, who in response only pointed at himself in bewilderment. The Taoists called the man to them and told him that they were looking for a huge tiger that devoured people, and that they had come to catch it, and then they asked him if he had seen it. Spencer, playing the fool, slapped his fist into his palm and replied that he had doubted and could not believe his eyes when he saw its size. But now he was absolutely sure that he had seen a large tiger. While one of the servants sighed with relief, the dark-haired Taoist asked where the guy had seen him. Spencer responded by saying that it was difficult for him to explain, so he would rather take them there. Then all the Taoists followed the strange guy. Spencer, leading the people, said that even in a dense forest, animals make a path, and large and formidable animals often walk along this one. Looking behind him, he added that if they went along this road, they would come to the place where he saw the tiger. Spencer turned around and looked at the Taoists, noting that there were only 2 Taoists and 6 servants. And then, with a smile on his face, he thought that even if these Taoists were strong, there would still be more boars in number, so it should be an interesting performance. Spencer then asked if they knew anything about Mount Wudong, to which the dark-haired Taoist replied that they knew little. Hearing this, the man said that wherever they go, there is always a story that has taken root in a certain area, and then said that it is not for nothing that this mountain is called the Mountain of Dominance, because all creatures from people to animals who love to dominate in everything have gathered here. Touching the tree, Spencer said that it was said that wild boars now dominate this mountain, and then raising his hand with a piece of wool, he said that boars' vessels in the form of their wool were left everywhere. The red-haired Taoist looked at his comrade and asked if he thought it was funny that pigs were dominant. In response, Believe said that he heard that their people had recently been attacked by wild boars, and then suggested that perhaps this tiger had lured them there on purpose. Sighing, the red-haired man replied that there was nothing wrong with that, since their opponents were just animals. Then the dark-haired Taoist told the boy to listen to his surroundings and notice that not only animals, but even insects could not be heard here. Hearing this, the servants began to look around a little excitedly. Suddenly, one of them noticed something. Suddenly, wild boars started running out from behind the bushes towards the people. One of the servants shouted to the others to shorten their steps, while one of the boars tried to knock them down with its body. But this boar only dined past the men and ran further into the bushes. The servant was surprised that the boar had just passed by for lunch. Suddenly, another one shouted that there was danger behind. The first servant did not immediately understand what the other meant, and meanwhile, a huge boar was approaching him. And a second later, that boar lifted that servant into the air on its tusks, piercing him through and through. The servant who managed to notice this boar called his already dead comrade and rushed at the boar, while it also rushed at the man. While the screams of servants and the angry grunts of pigs echoed around, the red-haired Taoist stood and simply watched. Suddenly, his hand was engulfed in flames, and he said that if they could think of attacking from behind, then they were quite smart for pigs. And then, when the fire had engulfed his entire body, the guy said that he should then respond to them appropriately, and then said that he would burn them all to ashes. Meanwhile, one servant fought with a boar, trying to defend himself from his ex with a sword. Suddenly, this boar noticed some light to the side, and suddenly the red-haired Taoist appeared from the side and launched his flame at the boar, hitting it, causing it to fly to the side. The servant thanked the red-haired Taoist, calling him Alex. Alex glanced at the servant and told him to finally pull himself together. Otherwise, if he got distracted, these boars would kill him. While the Taoists and servants fought the boars, other boars watched from behind the bushes. Suddenly, one of the boars returned, and the other noticed him and noted that he was still alive. And then he said that these little people immediately began to use their abilities, just as the leader had predicted. Afterwards, he quietly said that he would try to change his location. But then Spencer, who appeared out of nowhere, said that this would not work because they all had to cut each other's throats. Frightened by this sudden appearance, the boars instantly ran out from behind the bushes, exclaiming in surprise and fear. And then suddenly these boars were torn to pieces by water bubbles. As it turned out, these bubbles belonged to the black-haired Taoist. Then he turned around and said that these pigs were not as stupid as Ka thought, but it looked like they had already killed everyone. Then one of the servants, turning to the Taoist, calling him Kyle, said that they had lost sight of that guy, meaning Spencer, to which Kyle replied that it looked like the boars had taken him, and then he told the men to forget about him and better kill some more pigs. At the same time, the boars who had been hiding until now were shaking with fear, and one of them was perplexed as to why the boars continued to come out to them if he had ordered them not to do so after the first attack. Meanwhile, Spencer was sneaking up behind them, smiling maliciously. Suddenly, he screamed, and the boars cried out in fear. And then, like the previous two, they also ran out from behind the bushes. Seeing this, the guy laughed, covering his mouth with his hand. And then he thought about how difficult it is for animals to suppress their instincts. And then he thought angrily that these pigs should continue to kill each other until they all died. Meanwhile, another of the boars was also perplexed by what his comrades were doing and why they were not following the plan. Suddenly, the leader's eyes began to shine with an unkind light. Suddenly, he stepped forward, saying that he himself would sort everything out. As he ran forward, he wondered why these stupid nobodies couldn't just follow the plan. He thought about why they had walked over his words and that he knew they were stupid, but not that stupid. And then the boar leader finally stepped onto the battlefield. With his eyes wide and huffing with anger, he wondered what was going on there, since there were only 10 left. Suddenly, one of the servants noticed the leader and decided to draw the attention of the Taoist Kyle to him. Looking at this boar, the guy immediately realized that, judging by its appearance and behavior, it was their leader. Suddenly, one of the boars asked the chief whether he needed to call everyone together, to which the chief angrily asked whether he had really decided to act. Sitting on a rock and watching the proceedings, Spencer said that, as expected, the boar leader began to flutter when almost all of his subordinates had given up their hooves, but even those who survived looked tired. And then, looking condescendingly, he asked what the result of this fight would be. Then the boar leader furiously shouted to his subordinates to attack the people with all their might. And then, running out with them, he said that he, the leader of Mount Wulong, would fight with them. Alex, noticing the leader, said that their boss had really come out, and then noted that his size was quite impressive. Starting to get heated up, he noticed that his current attacks wouldn't even scratch him, so he decided to do something. And suddenly, his whole body was engulfed in flames, burning his clothes, and he shouted that he would reveal his full potential. And then he shouted that he would put an end to this battle. Alex stretched his arms forward and launched a fiery phoenix at the boar leader, which headed straight for the boar. The leader thought that the Taoist was underestimating him if he wanted to defeat him with such forces. And then he stamped his hoof, and his eyes glowed with a yellow light, and he thought that he would take the life of the Taoist in exchange for those that he had taken. And suddenly the phoenix flying towards the boar was torn apart, and it did not touch the leader at all. Alex's mouth dropped open in surprise as he watched this. Without a second's hesitation, the leader pounced on the boy while he could only raise his hands in fear. Then the boar struck the guy with an attack, and a bright flash of light eclipsed everything around. As it turned out, Kyle had managed to get in front of his partner and protect him, asking irritably how Alex could have wasted all his powers without thinking, while Alex noted that this boar had been hiding his powers until this moment. As it turned out, Kyle managed to injure the leader and break off his tusk, and the boar was only thinking about how this Taoist was able to parry the blow into which he put all his strength. A huge crater appeared in front of the boys, and the leader stood nearby, while the servants asked if the Taoists were okay. Looking at the Taoists, the leader thought that everything was a little more complicated than he thought, and wondered what he should do now. While adjusting the protection on his hands, Kyle told Alex to regain his strength while he finished what he started. Suddenly, Spencer came out onto the battlefield, hissing loudly and saying that it was no fun to fight either. Everyone present looked at the guy in surprise. Suddenly, Spencer, approaching, suddenly jumped up from his place, and he found himself right behind the backs of the Taoists and the boar leader. After saying that it was impossible to interfere in other people's fights, the guy waved Kyle's severed arm with the thing that protected Alex, declaring that it was cheating, and therefore he would take that thing away. Suddenly, Kyle felt a strong pain, and blood began to spray from the wound. Noticing this, he began to shout loudly. Taking out the thing that had protected the Taoist from the attack of the boar chief, Spencer smiled slyly, and saying that this thing was very useful, threw away his now unnecessary hand. While the Taoist writhed in pain, Alex angrily asked how he dared to injure one of their men. And then he shouted that the guy could no longer hope to be left alive after something like that. The boar leader, meanwhile, asked after a short silence whether this guy was Spencer. Taking the sword out of the necklace, the former tiger replied that the boar had a good sense of smell, and then said that he should return the favor, and therefore how could he trust him to someone so inexperienced? The servants, raising their swords, shouted that this guy wouldn't get away with it so easily. The boars, meanwhile, began to cry out questioningly, asking if it was Spencer. Spencer folded 2 fingers and said that everyone was already aware of the matter. And then, snapping his fingers, he said that now we could finish it. Suddenly, blue circles appeared under one of the boars. Those same circles also appeared under one of the servants. Suddenly, the man's entire body was engulfed in blue fire, which burned him, leaving only ashes. As it turned out, this fire engulfed everyone who was in this place, except for the Taoists, one of whom was still sitting on the ground, clutching his wound. Alex, seeing all this, was surprised by this power, and suddenly he realized that these were the powers of Shinsu. The boar leader was also not engulfed in this fire, and therefore watched in panic as his subjects died. Alex thought that such power of this level had long since ceased to exist, and had disappeared before his birth. And then, looking at the guy in surprise, he wondered how this guy could use this power. Meanwhile, Spencer looked at him with his red eyes, the whites of them blackened, and the red-haired Taoist thought that he needed to inform everyone about this terrifying power. Alex, stuttering and terrified, muttered quietly that he needed to be told about this power and couldn't take his eyes off the guy. Suddenly, Spencer began to approach the Taoists. When the boys were engulfed in flames, and it seemed that he did not make a single movement with his sword. The boys huddled together, continuing to slowly burn out, and Spencer moved on. He approached the leader of the boars. Closing his eyes, the chief said he realized that they had, as it turned out, fallen into Spencer's trap. And then he noticed that the power emanating from him meant that the guy had raised his level, and then he congratulated him on this. Spencer, looking sternly at the boar, asked if he wanted to say anything last. The leader looked down and noted that there was no point in saying anything, and then said that he had a request. But he didn't have time to say what exactly this request was, because Spencer chopped off his head with his sword, causing a surprised expression to appear on the boar leader's face. Sighing, the man asked irritably if this pig had really tried to ask him for something. And then, like everyone else, the boar was consumed by fire. Sometime later, Spencer reached the village that was near his mountain. The man noted to himself that after that battle he received, albeit of a low level, 1 ball and 2 necklaces. He also received 3 useful spells and 2 useful books. Spencer looked at it and smiled greedily, noting that it was a pretty good catch. And then, remembering his sword, he sent word that if he used its power, it would destroy absolutely everything. Sighing and putting the things he had received into Hannah's necklace, he thought that this power was too powerful, and that was her problem. And then he remembered that he had found 2 more letters. Looking at them, he thought that there was probably something important written at the bottom. He was sure of it, but he couldn't check because he didn't know the letters. Suddenly, the same girl who was picking shamrocks called out to him, and Spencer turned his head to look at her. The girl said, holding a book in her hands, that thanks to the man, her chickens are well fed, grow very large and lay very large eggs, which she sells, and with the money she buys reading lessons. Still holding the letters in his hands, Spencer asked again, and the girl asked if he really needed someone who could read. And then she snatched the letters from the man's hands. Puffing with impatience, the girl opened one of the letters and said that she would read everything here now. And then she began to read. And the content of the letter turned out to be this: our battle with magical animals does not end. It becomes larger and larger, and the place by the Red Sea can turn into a war field against magical creatures. Spencer was surprised by the word war. Noticing that the man's expression had changed, the girl asked him what had happened, to which Spencer replied that nothing had happened and told the girl to continue reading. The girl continued, "The government's actions are very alarming, so all Taoists be on guard." And then the girl said that this was all she could read, to which the man replied that this was enough for him and thanked the girl. He stroked the girl's head and asked if she wanted anything as a thank you for reading, to which she replied, laughing, that she didn't need anything. And then she added that he saved her, and therefore she didn't need anything. Suddenly, looking at this girl and her smile, he immediately remembered Chelsea. And then, having said that, even if that was the case, he still wanted to thank her. He handed her a bag with some little things. Looking into the bag, the girl noticed with delight how shiny these things were. Spencer told the girl not to show them to anyone, to run home quickly to hide them, and to open them only with her mother. Obeying her big brother, the girl ran home. After moving away a little, she turned around and shouted that if he needed to read anything else, he could always find her. Spencer saw the girl off with a smile on his face, and then he sighed heavily and raised his head, looking at the sky, still thinking about the contents of the letter. It was already night, and Spencer was walking somewhere in the forest and thinking that the Red Sea was a region to the west of here, and if a war started, it would quickly reach his village. Suddenly he touched the stone with his palm, and then he moved his hand down, and some signs began to appear on the stone and shine with a blue light. A second later, part of the stone separated and began to move away. As it turned out, there was a hidden door in this stone, which was now wide open. And behind this door there was a staircase that led down. The man stepped out the door and began to descend the stairs, thinking that if a great war began between people and magical creatures, then all the evil souls would raise chaos in this mortal world. A little while later, the man reached some kind of visit and walked straight ahead. There was a blue glow ahead, and Spencer walked boldly towards it. As he got closer, he thought that in case of war, everyone in this world would need strength. And then a huge blue bird appeared in front of Spencer. The man wondered out loud if anyone thought that his mountain contained something they thought had disappeared centuries ago. Continuing to approach closer, he noticed that before he simply couldn't approach here, but now everything had changed. Suddenly, some kind of blue mist separated from the bird, and taking the form of a bird, it screamed furiously. Coming almost close, Spencer declared that he was now ready to absorb the power of Shinsu entirely. Suddenly, the bird from the blue mist began to concentrate energy in its beak, as if preparing to attack. Then she fired a huge beam of energy straight at the man, which he didn't try to dodge. The blow left Spencer feeling pretty bad. His clothes were torn and he nearly fell to the ground, but he managed to stay upright. Grinding his teeth with the effort, he thought about how, even though he had raised his strength level, he was still barely holding on, and then wondered if his body could withstand all this force. Meanwhile, the bird flapped its wings, and waves of blue mist began to flow across the ground. This fog began to slowly surround the man. And then Spencer found himself in the epicenter of a blue tornado, which lifted him above the ground. This tornado of power continued to tear the man's clothes and tousle his hair, but he did not give in, but only tensed up even more and shouted loudly that he had to endure it. He then extended his hand forward in an attempt to fight his way out of the tornado, screaming that getting this power would only be the beginning, and if he didn't do it, he wouldn't be able to go out into the world. Continuing to reach for the center of this force, he shouted that he would rather die here than screw up. Spencer's eyes turned completely red, and he almost completely grabbed the center of that power, screaming at her to make her his forever. Suddenly he squeezed that center, and the bird began to cry out piteously, while Spencer continued to drink above the ground, no longer surrounded by the tornado. In order to be able to maintain this center of power, he supported his hand with his other hand. Suddenly, Spencer became a little confused, not understanding what was happening, and asked if he had really succeeded. But then suddenly he again felt strong pressure and pain. Now this force entered Spencer's body and seemed to begin to tear him apart from the inside, refusing to obey, causing blue flashes to occasionally burst out of his body. Gritting his teeth, the man asked the force if it still did not want to submit to him and was resisting. But then he realized that this was the power of Shinsu from ancient times, and therefore he only clenched his hands into fists tighter. And then pressing his hand to his heart, he began to try to tame this force. The tiger stripes appeared on the man's face again, and he said with a smile that even if the force tried to overcome him, he would still help it adapt to his body. Sometime later, Spencer was still in meditation, but it seemed that the power was no longer kicking in his body as much. Although his clothes were almost completely torn, the flow of power was calm and smooth. The man noted out loud that 4 years had already passed, and during this time, thousands of changes had already taken place inside his body. Suddenly, he sank to the ground and said that now he could finally achieve absolute perfection. Saying that he was finally able to comply with this blue flame, Spencer held the blue flame in his hands, which swirled in soft waves in his palm. While conjuring up his clothes and bringing himself into a dignified appearance, he noted that he had reached a new level. The man lowered his hands and found himself in complete silence, then sighed. Folding his arms across his chest, he noted that he had so much to do and wondered what he should sit down to do first. Suddenly, he remembered that girl from the village and decided to meet her. Sometime later, Spencer reached his village, where life was in full swing. The man stopped and asked the woman about this girl. In response, the woman asked, "He wants to know about Ava." Suddenly, the men standing nearby said that if he wanted to know about this girl, then her family was sent into slavery. Spencer asked why this happened. One of the men said that this family suddenly had a lot of money, and after that, they sent their daughter to school, but the nobles could not come to terms with the fact that a commoner was studying with their children, and therefore began to complain about Eva's family. The man continued, saying that in the end, the nobles said that this family stole the money and left this girl as a slave in one of the houses, and then added that this girl must be beautiful since they want to make her a concubine from a slave. Another man, laughing, said that the last time he saw her, she had a straight, sharp nose and pale skin, and then exclaimed, saying who knew that she would become so beautiful. One of the men was about to say that this family seemed to have a keen eye, when suddenly Spencer approached the men, and then with a threatening face he asked where this very house was, while his eyes glowed red. A few hours later, night had already fallen, and in one of the estates they were already getting ready to go to bed. Meanwhile, in one of the rooms, a woman, saying that everyone thinks differently, tricked a ball of fabric into blush. The woman applied blush to the young girl's cheeks, saying that she needed to accept this, that there was nothing wrong with it, and then added that this was the house of the richest man in their village. While combing the girl's long hair, the woman asked her if she was aware how many girls envied her, and then encouraged the girl to think positively. Having finished her preparations, the woman left the girl alone, and she stared at the floor with glassy eyes. Sometime later, the girl went outside and stood under the moonlight. Suddenly, someone said that he had finally found a girl. Recognizing this voice, the girl, who turned out to be that same Eva, asked if it was he who she thought of. Spencer noticed that she still remembered him. The girl, now a young woman, replied that of course she remembered, since he had helped her 4 years ago, and then said that the man had not changed at all during the time. Coming closer, the man said that he had come today to learn to write. The girl looked at the guy in surprise and asked again, her eyes wide open. And then she smiled brightly and closed her eyes, saying that of course she would help, but she didn't have much time. Spencer and Eva found a place to study and sat down on the rocks, and the girl began to explain something to the guy, pointing to something in the book. The girl said that if he wrote it like that, the meaning of the sentence would change. While she was telling all this, her eyes were shining with happiness. Suddenly, the girl stopped explaining and fell silent, her expression drooping a little. The man, noticing the change in the girl's behavior, looked at her questioningly. Slamming the book that was lying on her lap shut, Eva said that it was time for them to finish their lesson. Standing up, the girl with her eyes closed said that she was glad that Spencer was able to master today. Clutching her skirt in her hands, the girl continued, saying that she suddenly remembered how she was discriminated against for being a girl and studying, but she did not give up and continued, and then said that, probably thanks to a man, she was brave. Looking at the girl, Spencer asked again about courage. Looking at the guy with a sparkle and hope in her eyes, Eva asked if the man could fulfill her wish since she had taught him to write. Sometime later, a drunken gentleman returned to his estate. With a sharp movement, he threw open the doors to the room where the girl was already sitting. Laughing obscenely, the nobleman asked how long the girl had been waiting for him, and then said that he had drunk to lift his spirits. Coming closer to the girl, the man extended his hands to her and noticed that she looked even more beautiful in this dress. Almost touching her, he said that today they would go to heaven, and she only had to obey him. And so the man lowered his hands to his belt, unbuckling it. Suddenly, Eva hit him in the face, screaming at him not to touch her, causing blood to splatter. The man looked in surprise at his cheek, which now had a cut on it. Pointing a knife at the nobleman, the girl shouted that she did not want to live in such a house with such a man, and that she would rather die than do this, and he would die with her. Then shouting that Eva was a slut, the man also hit the girl on the head with a jug of wine, breaking it. From this blow, the girl fell onto the bed, and the gentleman shouted how she dared to cut him when he was spoiling her with compliments. And then the nobleman continued to beat the girl until she could no longer sit and only clenched her teeth. Some time later, Eva sat against the wall, covered in bloodstains and bruises, almost unconscious while the master stood over her, breathing heavily. The man noted that the girl was stubborn because she didn't make a sound. And then, having said that he was not against this view, he looked obscenely at the girl while drooling flowed from his mouth. Suddenly, someone grabbed him by the collar with 2 fingers, and then Spencer, on foot, with a wave of his hand, threw the man to the other end of the room. The girl didn't react to this in any way, but only sighed heavily. The guy said that he was worried about her because she asked him to find silver and then sent him here. Hearing this, the girl opened her eyes. And then Spencer went on to say that Eva had turned out to be even more unpredictable than he expected. Suddenly, the nobleman, shouting, rose to his feet and asked why no one was giving him any peace today. And then, turning to the guy, he asked who he was anyway. Hearing this, Spencer turned to look at the gentleman with a threatening look. And then he said that so be it. Spencer remembered Chelsea crying and screaming that she couldn't leave her husband. And then the guy began to approach the man, while the latter, crawling on the floor, tried to move away from him and beg for mercy. Suddenly, blue mist began to emerge from Spencer, and the man asked him again who he was. Suddenly, he screamed piercingly. The boy thrust his clawed hand forward and replied that he was Spencer, whom he had been so eager to kill. And then a huge blue tornado appeared over the entire estate of this gentleman. Sometime later, a man and a girl were walking up the mountain. Eva, still a little in shock, looked at Spencer's back. And then she noticed to herself that this brother turned out to be the master of the mountain. The guy turned around and said that he heard what had happened to her, and then asked if she despised him, since it all happened because of the jewelry he had given her. The girl looked at the man, her eyes wide. And then, looking away and smiling weakly, she replied that she could not hate the one who helped her. And besides, she was very inspired by the fact that she would finally be able to fulfill all her dreams. Feeling a little sad, the girl continued, saying that back then she didn't know how cunning and greedy people could be. And then, bursting into tears, Ava said that she just wanted to do what she loved, so why didn't life allow her to do it? Spencer looked at her sympathetically as she said that she couldn't do anything and didn't know where to go next. Suddenly, he struck the ground with the scabbard of his sword. And then he told the girl to pick up the sword, and then it would become her path and show her the way. Afterwards, the man added that Ava would become his follower. Learn to use this sword and protect the mountain, to which the girl responded in surprise that she was a girl and had never even held a sword in her hands. In response, Spencer told the girl to throw away all these prejudices about the female gender, because her confidence when she taught her to study and her courage when she wanted to live the life she chose herself were enough. After these words, the man concluded by saying that Eve is strong. Hearing this, the girl stared at him in surprise, and then she reached out for the sword. And then she nevertheless picked up the sword, mentally noting that it was heavy and that she was scared, but she would try. She said out loud that she would try to walk confidently along the path Spencer had laid out for her. And then, with a smile on her face, looking at the man, she said that she would protect his mountain until he returned. In response, the man said that the girl was a good girl and she should continue to live. 3 months later, Spencer stood at the entrance to the town of Eton. Looking at all these buildings, The man thought that this city was big, and then he thought about how everyone said that the mountain on which the city stood was high, but now his mountain seemed so small compared to this one. Afterwards, he remembered that these gates were built a long time ago, and behind them is the treasure of Savile, which doubles whatever is put inside, and many people desire this treasure. The man noted that he managed to reach this gate in human form, and then he wondered how he could get inside now. Suddenly, an old man, with a whole crowd of men walking behind him, called out to him and asked if the guy was a wanderer. Looking at the questioner, Spencer replied that it was so. The old man replied that they were just missing one, and then he told the boy to go with them, because what was the point of just standing around doing nothing? Then two men approached the guy and pulled him along with them, persuading him to join. While the company was climbing the mountain, the old man was telling them that today was the day when Mount Yen opens up once every 100 years. One of the men said that this was a special day for them because if they were lucky, they would be able to go inside. Another man, turning to Spencer, sarcastically remarked that if you stand at the entrance, you are no better than a stone at the door, and another also sarcastically asked if the guy really thought that if he stood there, the doors would be open for him. And then he said that the guy seemed smart, but didn't know anything, while Spencer looked at them with a stone face. Suddenly, another man complained that they were helping this land, so why should they enter through the back entrance and not the main one? Looking at the man with his sharp gaze, the boy wondered if these fools knew what would happen to them if they went in, and even if they succeeded, they only killed the weaklings. And then what? But then he thought that he didn't care about it. The main thing was that the doors opened, and in the meantime the company got to the doors. The old man pulled out some kind of piece of wood and extended his hand toward the door. Suddenly, a beam of light burst out of this piece of wood and went straight to the lock on the door. And then the doors suddenly swung open. Suddenly, a man came out from behind the door and called the old man, saying that he was late. The old man began to justify himself, saying that they were missing one person and they were late while they were looking for him. Suddenly, the man turned around and, saying that it didn't matter, ordered them to follow him. Meanwhile, a crowd of people had gathered behind these doors, and someone, standing on a platform, was announcing the names of the squads into which the people had been divided. One of the men in the newly arrived company asked if they were all servants, to which the old man replied that there were Taoists in front. Suddenly, the conductor pointed his finger at the men and loudly asked why they were still standing, and then commanded them to take their places. Passing members of the other squads, Spencer concluded that he was in the 5th squad. Suddenly, a man standing on a platform loudly announced that today, after 100 years, the doors of the mountain were finally opening. And then he greeted everyone. Wishing everyone success, he folded his hands and said that they would now begin teleportation. Suddenly, he shouted to someone to open the gate, and suddenly the ground on which the troops stood was illuminated by a red light. Meanwhile, the red demon was devouring the meat of a huge snake. Suddenly, he was distracted from eating, feeling something. And then the demon turned around, his green eyes flashing, and was glad that people had finally arrived. Suddenly, he spread his arms out to the sides and shouted a greeting loudly, and then laughed madly. Meanwhile, the people had already successfully teleported, and questions immediately began to be heard in the crowd about where they were and whether they were already inside the mountain. Suddenly, one of the men noticed something and tried to attract attention in a shaking voice. Suddenly, a huge magical wolf appeared in front of the crowd amid their surprised cries. Suddenly, one of the men, taking out a sword, asked how they were supposed to fight such a huge monster from the very beginning. Suddenly, some man shouted out that they were all fools since they could not distinguish a sacred animal from an ordinary beast. And then he added to the laughter of the other participants that this is why they do not rise in rank. Suddenly, the man with the beard noticed with a little surprise that this was the guardian of Mount Yen. Then another man with a tattoo on his forehead replied that it was so, and this wolf protects this mountain, and he has also reached a high level of strength, to which the man with a beard replied that then it would be necessary to greet him personally, and his comrade noted that other animals would not dare to compete with a sacred animal. Then the man with the tattoo on his forehead replied that that is why he is someone they are proud of. And then the squad leaders began to gather their men, preparing to enter the mountain. Suddenly, the sacred beast, sensing something, turned around sharply. As it turned out, something in the crowd of people caught his attention. Suddenly, Spencer felt the beast's gaze on him. In a panic, the man wondered if this wolf had revealed that he was not human, then that would be very bad. While the beast kept looking at the guy, he thought that if the fact that he was not a human was revealed, then all the Taoists would pounce on him to kill him. But suddenly, to the surprise of the former tiger, the sacred beast only smiled, closing his eyes. Noticing this, Spencer thought with relief that it seemed like they weren't going to expose him. Suddenly, one of his squad mates touched the guy's shoulder and asked why he was still standing, since it was time for them to go. Meanwhile, all the troops were leaving the cave in an even formation. Sometime later, someone asked if it was true that he had been inside this mountain years ago, to which the interlocutor replied that it was true, and that then he had seen many healing herbs that he could not uproot. Then the woman replied that if it was true, then they would share, and then asked if they were on the right path, because it seemed to her that they were treading water. In response, the old man, the leader of Spencer's squad, replied that the woman should trust him, since it would not be in his own interest to deceive them. Suddenly, one of the girls who was watching the woman shouted that if the old man had decided to do something, he would not escape death. Then suddenly, the next second, something carried this girl away, leaving only splashes of blood. Hearing strange sounds, the woman and her subordinates turned around abruptly. As it turned out, the red demon grabbed the girl, dragging her along the ground by the head, while she, stretching out her hand to her comrades, asked for help. Noticing the red demon, the woman wondered where this evil spirit came from. The evil spirit, meanwhile, licked his sharp teeth with his long tongue. At the same time, another detachment was running through the forest. Suddenly, one of the men told the squad leader that everyone else had been left behind, to which he replied that he didn't care, because they hadn't come here to do botany. In response, the man said that if they were left, they could be killed, to which the squad leader replied that no one cared about their miserable lives. After suggesting that they were attacked by monsters, the commander ordered a stop, and both men quickly dropped to the ground. The leader of the squad looked around, holding a red bubble in his hand, which contained a paper crane. Suddenly, he started running somewhere. Seeing this, the man called out to his older classmate, and in the meantime, other members of the squad reached them. Suddenly, the leader shouted that he had found something, holding in his hands a skull on which was a small egg, surrounded by something golden. Then his younger classmate asked what it was, and whether this was what his teacher was asking the leader about. The squad leader replied that this was a very rare and special egg, under which golden lichen always grew, and then added that the man's teacher said that he hid it here because its time had not yet come, but now this egg is perfect. The man with the egg in his hands thought slyly that if he took it, he would rise in rank and become rich, and then began to say that they could now leave, when suddenly someone ordered them to stop. Suddenly, another group appeared from the depths of the forest, and their leader said that he smelled something as the men ran past the healing herbs. The men already there were very surprised by the appearance of another detachment. The captain of the other squad said with a predatory smile that he now understood why they were so eager to get here, because they had hidden such a valuable thing here. The leader replied that they had found the thing first, and therefore it belonged to their squad. Suddenly, two men from the enemy squad emerged, preparing to fight to take the egg back. Then the man exclaimed, asking what he wanted, a battle between their troops. In response, the other replied that if they had their eye on the same thing, then why don't they measure their strength, and the winner will take the prize? In response to which the man only gritted his teeth. Meanwhile, Spencer dug up the root and raised it above his head with a smile on his face, saying that this root was probably more than 50 years old, and he had a talent for digging things like this without a single scratch on it. But suddenly, coming to his senses, the guy abruptly threw the hoe on the ground, shouting what he was even talking about. And then he thought that it was dangerous because he almost got into the swing of it and forgot why he came, and that's not why he was here at all. Suddenly, a squad mate called out to him, causing Spencer to run, holding the root in his palms. At the same time, the evil spirit sucked out the souls of the arriving Taoists and their servants. And the old man who was leading those Taoists fell to the ground, bowing to the spirit, and addressed him by name, calling him Sylvester. And then, slightly raising his head, he asked if the spirit was happy. In response, the demon, holding the golden core of one of the Taoists on his tongue, replied that such Taoists were nothing to him, and he needed stronger opponents. In a panic, the old man, sweating a little, said that there were still many Taoists left, and then suddenly reminded him that the spirit had promised him something. In response, the evil spirit broke the golden core with 2 fingers and told the man not to worry. And then he added that he is one of the strongest spirits, and he always keeps his promises, unlike people. And then he passed by the old man, who was still lost, to the ground, telling him to lead him, because he did not want to hesitate, since it was depressing him. Having said this, the evil spirit, with a bloodthirsty smile on his face, declared that from this moment, the real hunt begins. Meanwhile, another squad was running after someone, and one of the men was shouting for his comrades not to let this monster go. The man shouted for them to corner the monster while his comrades chased after the monster, which had long white hair, long claws, and a face covered in stripes. Suddenly, one man shouted that he had caught the monster and, jumping up, hit it with his weapon, causing it to spin in the air. But the monster, as it turned out, did not die, but only violently attacked another man. Then the other man suddenly folded his arms, and from this his weapon suddenly plunged into the monster, killing it. A man watching this battle shouted for the men to be careful and not to think that these monsters were weaker than them. And then he turned to his senior classmate, who was standing on a mountain of corpses of these monsters, and said that they were finished. The men began to discuss how much they could sell these monsters for, since there were a whole bunch of them here, when suddenly an evil spirit appeared behind them. The men quickly noticed him and immediately turned around, drawing their weapons. Looking at the newcomer, one of the men asked if this was a human being, to which the other replied that this was an evil spirit. In response, the first man asked what this evil spirit was doing inside the mountain. An older classmate and also the captain of the detachment called one of his comrades and then ordered him to attack the spirit. Then the man attacked the spirit, cutting it into 2 pieces. The servants, seeing this, joyfully exclaimed that this was what they expected from the Taoist. But as it turned out, the evil spirit was not killed, but was completely unharmed. He tore off the man's head with his claws, saying that he was pathetic. And then quickly approaching the captain, he noted that he was slow. He then pierced the Taoist with his hand, who did not have time to do anything, causing him to cry out dully. A spirit's hand was sticking out of the man's body, holding his golden core, and the spirit noted with disappointment that the Taoist didn't have much strength, while he groaned pitifully. The evil spirit suggested that if the captain had so little strength, then the others did not, and then said that he would turn them all into sand. The servants began to run away screaming. Laughing dully, the spirit asked where they were going. Meanwhile, another detachment was following the tracks of some animal. The girl walking behind the captain asked if her older classmate had found anything. The man turned around and said that he would install the Huanjin here. The girl asked again in surprise, her eyes wide open. The man, taking out some object and emitting a beam of light from it, said that while he was doing this, the others should protect the territory. Suddenly, a focused beam of light emerged from the object and spread out in different directions. The girls, notifying others, walked around the area, saying that they were installing a Huanjin here, and therefore the servants needed to hire their places. The captain focused by raising his index and middle fingers and told the others to be on guard. Suddenly, someone shouted that someone was there, and they began to emerge from the fog. Suddenly, with irritation, they recognized the man they had found. Afterwards, one of them clarified whether it was correct that this man's name was Tyler. As it turned out, the man turned to Spencer and said that they would be nearby, so he should not worry, because he would be safe and could continue to go and collect medicinal herbs. And then he added, ordering him not to go far. Spencer looked at the men with an emotionless face and agreed with everything they said, thinking that they thought he was a loser. The man installing the Huanjin sighed and said that he thought he was done with everything. As he lowered his hand, he said that he didn't know what would happen, so he had to be focused. Suddenly, someone asked the man why he was staring at the Huanjin, since there were no creatures visible here. In response, the man asked the girl if she had ever heard of Yoyukchahak. And then he began to explain that this was an evil spirit from ancient times, until this spirit in the form of a small ferret met someone. Suddenly, the men who met Spencer, noticing the ferret, wondered if such animals lived here. One man, saying that he was bored, decided to catch this animal and had already started to take out his sword. Suddenly, this cute-looking ferret bared its sharp fangs and made a huge hole in the man's body. Spencer, meanwhile, continued to collect herbs, when suddenly he heard something that made him flinch. Turning around, he wondered if someone had just shouted out there. The man stood up and asked if something had happened, and then remarked that his sensory system was not working properly because of the Huanjin. Meanwhile, the man who installed the Huanjin told the girl that evil spirits lived there and had no regard for these servants. At the same time, Spencer walked in the direction where the babies were screaming, and he noticed something. As it turned out, all the men who were scouting the area had already been killed, and next to them was a huge flock of these evil spirits. Suddenly, the spirits raised their heads from their bodies, and noticing a new victim, they began to squeal furiously. Suddenly, these little evil spirits gathered together and swirling, created a huge hurricane. This hurricane mercilessly tore apart the bodies of already dead men. And now this hurricane has reached Spencer, and all that was left of the man was a splatter of blood. But as it turned out, this hurricane did not hurt the guy at all, and he in turn chopped up the animals with a stone face. Why did all these little animals fall to the ground? Hearing how dangerous these spirits were, the girl asked the captain if they should leave this place then. The captain replied that if they did not take the risk, they would not gain anything useful, and besides, these spirits could only be fought with the help of a Huan Jin. The man looked at her sternly and said defiantly that the spirits only had to come here. Meanwhile, Spencer asked what the little thing was and said that he killed them all out of fear. And then he noticed that these animals possessed amazing strength. The boy scratched his head and wondered what he should do if all the servants had died. And then he began to pick up the bodies of these spirits, smiling greedily. Suddenly, the man noticed someone and looked at him. A black silhouette appeared in front of Spencer. A man emerged from the shadows and asked in a trembling voice if he was from the Pingun squad. Meanwhile, another squad was previously busy fighting, and one of the men was holding a huge ball made of seals. Another said irritably that this was exactly the place where the Huangjin was installed, to which another man replied that it was probably a Taoist from Pingong. The man asked his leader what they should do now. The leader replied that they would go ahead, and then he said that some minor obstacle had appeared, but nothing had changed in a global sense. The squad rushed forward and their leader said that if anything happened, there would be a battle of squads.